Hey, Ruby, want some food? Happy Saturday. Taking some of my Gulf War medication here, unfortunately. How's it going, everybody? Happy Saturday. How's everybody doing today? Hello, hi Tia. Thanks for supporting me, I appreciate it. Happy Saturday, exactly. Happy Saturday. Yeah, you know, it's very cold and very rainy where I am today. The only thing it is, it's not windy, but it's about 36 degrees, so it's very, very cold, like just above freezing. And it's like this incessant, it's not a hard rain, it's like just a steady rain. And I mean, I'm very comfortably indoors, like many of you probably are, but think about being outside, either in a tent or with bombs going off around you, or both. Just think how miserable that must be. And I don't even know how the people do it. Hey Sheila, how you doing? You know, I just don't know how they do it. They're just going through hell. I mean, I've experienced some of it in the military. You go through lots of, you know, really bad conditions when you're out training, which is, I guess, it's good that you get to experience it so you can deal with it, but it's not fun, right? So, yeah, it's cold everywhere right now. It's wintertime, right? Except for in the South, in the global South, this is their summer, which is so weird, right? It's weird how people in South America right now this is their summer, and then in North America, when we're in the height of summer, is their winter. It's very strange. It's all about which side of the earth is tilted towards the sun. That's the amazing thing about the sun, isn't it? We're just in that perfectly sweet spot where, even though the swings are pretty dramatic to us, they're teeny compared to the rest of the solar system. It's just like, wow, you know. It's such a fascinating thing, you know. How did we get so lucky to be in that one little sliver where life can exist, you know? It's really dumb luck. In fact, the fact that even you and I are here talking right now is totally dumb luck. Like, how many people or how many lives aren't there because of whatever factors? So it's very rare to be, you know, we're just so lucky that we were actually lucked into this thing called life. And it makes you think about, you know, when you start to lose people in your life, you start to, and people you've worked with or people you know, and all of a sudden you find out they've died and you're like, damn, it just brings you into this new realm of, you know, just think about the fact that I better get on with it because I don't have unlimited time here, right? But then sometimes you feel overwhelmed by everything and you're like, well, you know, I got so many things I want to do. Which one should I start with, right? You ever feel that way? So I guess the key is just to write down one of them. Just start digging at one, right? Or start doing the digging against one of them. I think the people that are best at life is they don't think about this stuff too much. They just literally start doing shit and just get to it. They don't worry. They don't let the future worry them. They don't let the past regrets. They just kind of go and do, right? And they take whatever's good, whatever they're good at or whatever they enjoy, they just kind of just go with it. And they kind of just find their bliss in the action of it. And that's a good place to be if you can get there. I wish I were there. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm doing a little bit of it. Somebody says I have complex PTSD. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. I have some friends that are dealing with that too. That's tough, you know. Just the emotional swings you go through when you come out of a really horrific situation or whatever it may be can be you know, hard to cope with. That's why a lot of people start doing drugs and alcohol, because they just don't know what else to do, right? It's just they feel so effed up. And you know, we're complex creatures. Let's face it, we're complex. Like, there's a lot of things going on. And the fact is that none of us are the same, right? It's amazing. You know, we all have similar, you know, desires and similar beliefs in some ways, but we're so different individually. You can put 10 people in a room and all 10 will see something differently, right? It's amazing. But in the end, we're very programmable too. We're like a blank slate. I don't believe humans are good or bad, but I think humans do a lot of bad things, unfortunately, more than they do good things. But not that the people are doing those things, right? The everyday people, they do more good than bad, but the governments and the powerful are the ones that promote the bad things that unfortunately give us all a bad name, especially here in America. So, and the other thing is, you know, listen, it's everybody's responsibility to kind of figure out what they need to figure out, right? So you can't say, well, I didn't know any better. You can say that, but it's fair for people to be critical of us from outside looking in, because they basically say, you know, Americans, I did a video about this, when people travel, you know, Americans are generally overweight, We have more overweight people than most societies, and we're usually pretty confident and pretty loud and talkative, and which is not exactly welcome in most places. Sharing your opinion like me, loud and proud. A lot of people are like, "Damn, that's an American again." They think they're the greatest. They're out there talking shit, and they have no clue what they're talking about, right? Which is painful to watch, right? And I see it a lot on these lives that I go to, these pro-Israel lives. That I was told last night that I was completely naive, that I had no idea what I was talking about, that I couldn't possibly imagine what it was like living in Israel. I'm like, okay. And then they kicked me off the live. I was like, all right. So you got to remember, there are a lot of people that just that haven't been exposed to certain things yet. And if you're talking from a position of abject ignorance, it's not necessarily your fault, because there's somebody that probably wanted you to be ignorant for a reason. So in a way, you have to kind of just bite your tongue and, be the bigger person and let them be where they are. But, it's amazing. And even yourself, think about it this way. We've all said and done things in our past, and later you look back and you're like, damn, like, was that me? Who was that person that did that stuff? And it's the same thing for them. So you got to give people room to be that part, because everybody hopefully evolves as they learn and stuff. But it's hard sometimes, right? It's hard to listen to somebody who's not where you are, and you're like, man, I wish I could get this person to where I am, but they're not open to it, right? And that's very frustrating. But rather than yelling at somebody down to them and talking past them, which is what feels good to do, right? You're like, you're an idiot. You don't know what I'm. But that doesn't do any good, right? That doesn't open them up. That closes them down. So what do we do then, right? So I like to just plant little seeds of truth, and then you let them go where they go. And trust me, I get emotionally drawn in. Like, I was pissed last night when this person did this to me. Anybody else, you're like, you want to be able to make your point, they cut you off, they throw you. You're like, damn, that wasn't. So I try not to do that on my lives. When I have a guest, I really go out of my way to try to listen, even when it's really painful. Like, I see comments sometimes saying, like, you're more patient than me, I would have kicked this person off or something like that. And I get that. But in fairness, I think it's good to treat people lean on the side of being more respectful than not. And then, if somebody's literally going off on like a 5 or 10 minute monologue and you just can't get a word in edgewise, then you have to sometimes pause or at least mute them and then say, hey, just a second, take a breath. Let me get a word in here and there, but I'm happy to let you finish. And then I try to, whatever. I think that's the better way to do it, right? Because if we're never going to have consensus on anything. And again, there are some things that we all agree on. That's amazing if we put aside some of the stuff we argue about. Like, I think all of us want to have a good life. We want to have peace. We want to have if you have kids, you want your kids to grow up safe and do well. And, you want to see your community do well, and you don't want to see, war going on. It's crazy, right? I think we all agree on that stuff. The problem is when some of our worst qualities get unleashed and we let them go, right? So things like greed and ego and conquest and domination, and some of these qualities that certain people just tend to foster. And that is what's the problem. That's what creates the imbalance that then leads to all the strife that we're coming about, right? So can I make a video on the protest in Washington on Saturday? Yeah, I can do that. I've already talked about it a bunch, but for those who don't know, next Saturday in Washington, D.C., there's a protest called the March for Gaza, and it's probably going to be very well attended. So I'm going to be there. I'm meeting up with some other people. Someone's coming to stay at my place, which I offered out, so that's good. I'm glad someone's taking advantage of that. And it's going to be a pretty interesting day, right? It's going to be a lot of people. But the thing you have to know about protests in D.C., if you're thinking about going or if you're going to go, and if you haven't been to a big protest before, if this is your first time to a big one, don't expect your phone to work. Don't expect your phone to work. I went to the pro-Israel protest, which had about 300, maybe 350,000 people, which is well attended. My phone didn't work at all. Like, you could barely make a phone call, but no way you couldn't get on the internet at all. So unless you have satellite phone that goes up to a satellite directly for internet, you're not going to have internet. So if you're planning on coordinating with people when you get there, like, oh, I'll just give you a call. No, don't plan on that. You have to pre-plan. Imagine it's like 1970 and there's no cell phones. Like, how did you coordinate stuff back then? That's what you got to do. So meet at metro stops or meet at, this restaurant or whatever at this time. You got to do it that way. And then we'll have to meet back here kind of thing. So yeah, I actually separated from some friends that I went to the pro-Israel rally with, and I said, I'll call you. No, I couldn't. By the time we got close enough to the rally, because we parked a ways away, phones weren't working at all. So the other thing is, you want to bring some milk. Milk. Why the hell would you bring milk, right? Well, if you don't know, if you've ever given pepper spray before, which I unfortunately have, it sucks. Milk is the only thing that really helps speed up kind of ending what it's doing to you. So sometimes you can bring some milk, just like a little quart-sized milk jug, and that's if you get pepper spray. If things get crazy and the police come in and sort of break stuff up or whatever, hopefully that doesn't happen. Somebody says, why is there no internet? Because the cell phone towers that are positioned have a bandwidth limitation, and they can only handle so many phones. When they build these towers, they don't assume they're going to have 500,000 people within 3 towers all the time. It's dairy milk. It's got to be dairy milk. There's something in the lactose and the protein or something that helps counteract the pepper spray. I don't know why. I don't know the science of it, but every time I've seen people at protests who are getting pepper sprayed, they have milk ready to go. So, you can wear protective gear. Yeah, but I mean, it does look a little strange though if you're going. It looks like you're a military person going into a crowd with all this gear and all these shields and stuff. So, I don't know. I'm gonna wear sunglasses and a hat and hope for the best. But you want to bring your own supplies too. So I'm bringing a backpack with an extra set of battery chargers for my phone and my other equipment. I'm going to take some video just to try to get some B-roll, quote unquote, for the crowd and talk to some people if possible, do some interviews with people if possible. We're talking about the January 13th protest in Washington, D.C. Somebody asked me if I'll do a video on it. I said yes, and I'm just talking about some of the things related to it. Someone's saying vinegar can help too. I've never tried vinegar. I tried milk when I got pepper sprayed. It worked pretty well. But when you go there, just to let you know, so you can't buy anything. It's very hard sometimes to get to a street vendor. There are vendors, but the lines are like ridiculous. So the best thing to do is to bring your own water, your own snacks, your own communication devices. Somebody has said they have a set of 13 radios. Radios work great. So, the old days, walkie-talkies, right? So that's the way to communicate in the crowds. So those are the things that I'm bringing to be able to coordinate with the crew I'm going with. And I put a link in my bio. It's in my link tree, and it says it's a group you can join to talk about the protest. And I haven't done a video yet, but I will, and I'll promote that in the comments. But it's on Telegram, and it's called Washington. It's called what did I call it? I think it's December 13th protest. That's the name of the group. December 13th protest, like spelled just like that with no spaces. December 13th. You'll see it. It's in my link tree. So if you're somebody who wants to get on there and learn more about it, or if there's a poster of it that shows the details inside the group. And if you want to coordinate with other people, I offered a couple nights ago if somebody needed a place to stay. I have some space in my place, and somebody reached out, and so they're doing it, which is cool. And I'm getting them from the airport and then taking them back. Luckily, I have the time to do it. So anybody that can help out, great. If I can help give you a ride, I have room for 4 people in my car, one of which is already coming. So if you need a ride to DC and you're in the region of, the Delmarva region, let me know and I'll try to help you get there. Did I say it? I said January 13th. Is that what I said, or did I say December 13th? I mean, if I said December, I mean January 13th. Yeah, sorry. Sometimes the brain goes a little crazy. Yeah, January 13th protest is the group if you go into my link tree. Also, if you ever want to contact me, I put an email. I created an email just for, online stuff. And if you ever want to contact me and ask me, subjects you want to talk about or some kind of personal message or whatever, or if you're somebody that wants to help out, because I'm actively looking for people to help me in my social media journey, because I'm not that adept at all this stuff. I've had to learn a lot quickly, but there's a lot of stuff you have to do, and you want to kind of keep it looking good and kind of thematically common. And I don't even have thumbnails for my videos on YouTube. I've just been dumping stuff in places, right? I don't know much about anything. So there's somebody that's, I think, really good at this that has volunteered to help me, which is, I can't wait to talk to him. He's a content creator who I've followed for a while here on TikTok, and I really like his videos. He's a very emotionally sensitive guy who just puts himself out there, which I think is good, and a nice person. So he just happens to be a social media person, which I'm excited to meet him. But whenever you're dealing with volunteers, I mean, this is in anything in life, right? People will get excited at first, and then it kind of just tapers off, and that's to be expected. So I had a little group together a while back, and it kind of fizzled out. Probably because I didn't do a good enough job, keeping it going along. But that's just what happens with volunteers. Somebody says, I only see your lives. Yeah, I'm making videos. I haven't made as money in the last week. I've been busy with some other stuff. I've made like 3 or 4. I just made one this morning. And it's actually kind of, again, it's more of my same kind of personality coming out, where it's kind of snarky, right? But it basically said, it's like, this is what it means to F around and find out. Right? I said the people in the blue and white jerseys are not so excited when they finally F around and find out. And then it has a little clip of showing some of the aftermath of them having some losses, let's put it that way. and some of the emotional responses from the community. So yeah, I do videos. Listen, this the way it works with creativity. I don't know if you're someone who's made videos before. You get these little streaks, these spurts. It's very hard to be creative every day at like 8 in the morning, 12. It doesn't hit you all at once. So I have a lot of different videos that I've saved in my favorites, and I'm going to go through them this afternoon, and I'm going to use some of them to do some green screening and other stuff like that, because people are amazingly creative, and there's stuff I can't even think about that they come up with, right? So, hello from Paris. Hey Nadia, how you doing? Yeah, I've been in Paris 4 times when I was in the army back in the day, back in 1989, 1990. Yeah, I went to Paris 4 times. Love Paris. Beautiful city. French people weren't very nice to Americans, though. If you don't make an effort to speak French, which I think we should, and I was just a young guy, I didn't have a clue. The French people are like any other people. They kind of like, you're in their country. Like if people come to our country, people want people to speak English, not Spanish or whatever. And some people in America get angry at people for speaking their native tongue in public. Like if they go to a McDonald's or something, which, whatever, just an example. And there's somebody waiting in line that's U.S. and they're kind of like, don't like immigrants. And they start speaking in Spanish. They look at them and say, stop talking that nonsense. Or if they speak Vietnamese or Chinese or whatever. So fair is fair, right? The French have every right to expect people to assimilate it to their culture too, right? So, it's interesting. We have expectations of others, but when others have them of us, we get offended. It's like what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? Yeah, I would say this. Yeah, I agree. Paris and all of Europe, by the way, all of West, and even America now, it's happening too. The immigration, it's unbelievable how immigration has changed the landscape of these Western European countries. And I don't know how it came to be politically that was going to be the choice, but, especially in Italy, because it's one of the first places that physically represents itself in the Mediterranean as well as Greece. I mean, think about it, man. There's a lot of people leaving North Africa and elsewhere coming into Europe looking for a better life, and a lot of them are military-age men, which is kind of unnerving, right? Especially in our country. And again, I'm all for trying to be kind to people and try to help them. I'm not one of these people that says the law has to be, that can be a jackass way of being, because you lucked out of being here, right? So it's kind of arrogant for you to say, you got to come in legally. No, listen, everyone's looking to either escape violence. And unfortunately, for many people in the Central and South America, our country destabilizes, our intelligence agencies goes in and destabilizes countries for political reasons. Then they use these death squads to try to deal with problems of people who resist, and then they have to flee. And then they come towards the United States to get out of the problem that we created. Then we tell them, you have no right to come in. It's your fault. Get the hell out, right? We have to stop creating the framework within which these problems exist. And I think that's fair to point out, right? So, yeah, the U.S., I always like to say, I would love to say good things and positive things about both my country, and I'd like to say good things about Israel. I really would. I think it's probably a very beautiful place in terms of going there and visiting, and just the way it's been laid out and developed and stuff. And my parents went there, but I can't go to a place where I totally disagree with their policies. I'm stuck here, not stuck, but I grew up here, so my roots are just kind of here, right? You have family, you have work, you have just the inertia of life, right? It's kind of what you know. I've thought about it a lot, especially now that I'm speaking out publicly. It may be well advised for people like me to reposition, right? And I wouldn't mind it. I just have to figure it out. I get very, my brain is, when I got through this Gulf War shit, my brain has been very overwhelmed. I can't really put together the pieces of the puzzle in my personal life as much as I used to. So I'm just trying to figure it out. But the cool thing is with trading, which is what I'm trying to do to make money, because it's hard to do, but once you get good at it, you can do it over and over again, and you can do it from anywhere as long as you have an internet connection, right? So I'm working on some of that today too, because I got to get my, it's amazing when it comes to fear. It's amazing. Fear is such an interesting emotion, because it affects me in a big way in many cases. I'll tell you an example, and I've shared this before here. I was so afraid, I don't know if the word is afraid, I was so hesitant to go onto social media, because I swear to God, I tell you this, I thought that nobody would listen to me. I really mean that. I'm not saying that to be some sort of bullshit. I was thinking about it for like a year, because I learned a lot, obviously, and I wanted to get it out of me. But I kept talking to my military counselor, the guy from the VA, who we talk to about once a month. They check in on us to make sure we're not losing our minds, which is nice of them. And I kept telling him, like, I really want to do this. I have a lot of things I want to talk about, but I'm not sure anybody's going to want to listen. I was just all over the place, like scatterbrained, and I was thinking about, what am I going to talk about? Am I going to talk about my Uber experience? Am I going to talk about blackjack that I used to play for a living? Am I going to talk about cannabis that I used to grow? And am I going to talk about my experiences in jail? Am I going to talk about, my younger years in the military? Am I going to talk about GOP? I was all over the place. He's like, listen, pick one thing, put your camera on, start talking. That's what he said. I was like, all right, fair enough. So I finally did it after 3 months of encouragement from him, and then it worked out, luckily enough, which is a good example for everybody that, fear and trepidation, which is in a lot of our minds, right? Because we're just scared of stepping outside of our comfort zone. I still have that with other things, right? About like moving. I mean, it's a lot of fear. So, but it can be overcome if you just run through it, right? But and when you finally do it, it's like a task you've been procrastinating on, and then when you finally do it, like, why didn't I do that 2 months ago? That was easy, right? So that's life, right? We are strange creatures with how we do stuff. I don't know. I don't understand it, but just try to navigate it, right? It's hard to even understand yourself, much less your neighbor. But the good news is that, and this is the other thing, is that trying to put on a front where you hide from the world what's really going on in your mind and try to put on this, like, I got my shit together. That's the worst thing you can do, right? Yeah, by the way, somebody says you feel weird on camera. I couldn't agree more. Listen, the first time you start talking to an object instead of a person, it's very awkward. It's like hard to kind of keep your eyes on it because it doesn't seem normal. After a while, I mean, all I do here is, my picture shows up when I'm doing this on the screen. I just look at my forehead, which has more wrinkles on it than it used to, unfortunately. But yeah, you get used to it after a while really quickly. I don't know, just becomes habit. I'm sure that people that have been doing this for years and years, it's like they just look so comfortable on camera. But the only way to do it, like anything else, is just to do it. And it's like most skills, once you do it enough and you practice it, it just becomes part of you and you don't even think about it anymore, right? You just kind of get in the zone. So somebody was in the guest queue and I threw this again like I do sometimes and they jumped out. So whoever that was, I apologize. But my normal pattern of doing this show, just for those of you who are new, first of all, my name is Chip Barnes. Nice to meet you. Thanks for being here. And I do this show every Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 8 p.m. Eastern Time to 10 p.m. And then I do it every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, like we are here today, from 12 noon to 2 p.m., sometimes longer if the situation merits. I don't like to go too much longer on the weeknights because I got to get some sleep and I got other stuff I do. And the other thing is I'm loading these lives onto my YouTube and Rumble channels. The one from last night, I didn't get on there yet, but I'm going to do it as soon as the show ends. But if you miss any part of it, or if you want to go back and rewatch some of it, it has the TikTok live, it has the day and date. So you can reference the day of the week as well as the date. And I don't do any editing right now. I'm going to start taking pieces out of the lives that are like situation or issue specific, and they'll get posted separately. But again, this is a time thing, and yeah, it's like all the things I want to do, I'm not getting to. So I apologize on that. I know I keep talking a good game, but my follow through kind of sucks. But somebody says I got you. Yeah, there's somebody on the editing side. I got an age restricted notice. Maybe it was my talk about being in jail or something like that. Anyway, or maybe it's because I was doing maybe I said the word cannabis. That's probably what it was. Anyway, I'm sure there's probably not many people here under the age of 18 anyway. They're not supposed to be, I don't think. Anyway, so that's the other thing I want to talk about at some point. But let me finish my introduction. For those of you who don't know me, most people here are probably regulars. But if you don't know me, my name is Chip Barnes. I'm an Army veteran from the U.S. military, which I'm not necessarily proud of, but it's part of my life path. I had a scholarship in college. And then if you don't know, when you're a college person and you get part of your school paid by the Army, you have a service commitment when you get out, which mine was for 4 years. So, and I didn't choose to be in a combat unit. When you're in your middle of your senior year, you get to put in your request to the Army. I requested things like way back in the back, like, quartermaster, which is like supply. I didn't want to be on the front lines, right? But unfortunately, they put you where they need people. And so they needed people that year in combat units. And so I was put into a combat unit called Armor, which is tanks. And then I got stationed in Germany. And when I got stationed there, it was still before the wall came down. So it was still the Soviet Union. We could have been attacked, but then the next year it fell down, right? You all know that. But anyway, so I got deployed, most unexpectedly, to Operation Desert Storm in the Persian Gulf in 1990. And I got to tell you, we talked earlier about, the fact that one of the people that I know died recently. When you start to think about, you're going to war, like the first thing that pops into your head is, damn, I might die. Right? That can't help but be a part of your thinking. You try to put it out of your head, but you make a commitment, you got to keep it. Part of me wanted to not go, right? You want to be like a conscientious objector because I don't like war. But then you're like, well, hell, I took their money and I got to do what I was asked to do. So I went, and it wasn't that bad. We lucked out because of the power differential in that war. The U.S. was heavily armed, and the Iraqis were, they didn't have as much as we did. It was an easier, if there is such a thing, an easier war for our side than their side. So we didn't lose any soldiers, but unfortunately, a lot of us got exposed to a ton of stuff, and I unfortunately am caught up in that too. So everybody's health is different, obviously, but it's starting to really affect me in bad ways, which is no fun. But it's nowhere near what other soldiers went through in the next Iraq war, like burns and improvised explosive devices where people, had limbs that were lost and stuff. And not to mention what's happening to people in the West Bank and Gaza, right? So suffering is all relative, but suffering nonetheless is suffering, right? So it kind of sucks. But, being in a situation like this where I'm in a very industrialized country, I have a lot of benefits that most people throughout the whole world don't have, as many of you might have as well. You have a cell phone, right? So that's a minimum. Anyway, so I learned about the Israel-Palestine conflict when I was in college, just before I left to go into the Army. One of my classmates just so happened to be talking about, that was her senior thesis presentation in our class. Each person had to write a lengthy paper and then give a talk about it. And so hers was on the First Intifada, which was a big uprising in 1987, for those of you who don't know the history. And there was another one in 2005, the Second Intifada. So I didn't know anything about the Israel-Palestine issue, very little. I'd heard the common story, Israel's the United States friend, it's a safe place for Jewish people. They've always been attacked by these horrible Arab people that all they wanted to do was, make cafes go boom and make buses go boom, and they're just bad people. That's what I'd heard. And so when I heard this other version of what's going on, I was like really taken aback. I was like, damn. I had no idea these people were being so badly oppressed, and all the mistreatment and what happened in 1940. I had no clue about that, right? That Nakba. I didn't know anything about the Nakba. It just doesn't get talked about in the United States, or mostly in Israel either, I don't think. So I've given analogies before about the stories, but basically when you hear the first part of a story and it's incomplete, it shapes one set of beliefs, but when you hear a more contextual, full version of a story, it really changes how you think about it. Now, I think if you're a good person and you're open and honest and you have compassion and you have empathy for others, when you learn that the power dynamic is such that one group's being marginalized and the other one's doing the bullying, I don't side with the bully. When I watch a movie where there's a high school kid getting beat up on, the only thing I want to see is the kid punch the bully back in the face, right? Because that's like fair is fair. Well, I feel the same way about this issue. I think that the Palestinian people, and mostly Arab Muslims, some Christians, have been terribly marginalized by Israel. And what happened leading up to the formation of the State of Israel was no picnic either, right? There were basically terror groups that were run by people like David Ben-Gurion and others, one was called the Irgun, and their goal was to create chaos, to be able to create a situation where they got the British out, as well as to be able to push more Arab people off their land and forcibly form the State of Israel under the Zionist movement, right? And a lot of people try to defend that, saying it goes back 3,000 years and stuff like that. I mean, anybody can randomly pick a time where they, quote unquote, own the land. I could get a knock on my door today from a Native American. They go, hey, dude, you got to go. This is my place. My great grandfather was on this land. Your forefathers pushed me out. I want your house. Go, at a point of a gun. That doesn't make any sense, right? So why would it make sense for somebody who's Palestinian, Arab, Muslim, to be kicked off the place they've been living for multiple generations, right? You have to go with recent history. They didn't do anything wrong per se. Yes, there may have been crusades by their great grandfather that moved through territory, just like their great-great-grandfathers did the same. History is unfortunately replete with examples of that happening, right? People using that bad part of their personality, like I talked about earlier, that part that wants to go out and take advantage of others, conquest, exploit, pillage, grape, all that stuff, which is the worst of us, right? But anyway, so unfortunately the Zionist movement, which is a political movement, not a religious movement or even ethnically Jewish movement, it's a political atheist. It was founded by a political-minded atheist who wanted to find a homeland for Jewish people, primarily for those in Europe that had been marginalized for many, many decades. And I'm against that marginalization of Jewish people. But for whatever reason, most cultures were not accepting of Jewish people. A lot of people attribute it to the fact that Jewish communities, because of the prohibition on charging interest on financial transactions, they didn't have that same prohibition in their culture. So they would develop relationships in the community where they were lending money to others and further increasing their wealth. And it had a negative impact on the broader culture. That's a lot of what happened in Germany. I didn't know this until I read Mein Kampf, which is the recollection of, it's sort of like the biography of Adolf Hitler and his struggle. It means my struggle of what he went through. And I didn't know that was a big part of what his belief system was. I don't know. Anyway, I'm probably not supposed to say that name, I'm sorry, but that was a book. That's the author's name of the book, right? So I'm just being straight up about that. So again, reading history and reading people's, takes on stuff is really important to get that full context. So for whatever reason, even the United States, when there were Jewish people fleeing persecution in Europe, they had boats that literally came across the Atlantic and were turned away in New York in the harbor. They weren't allowed to come into the United States. Call that what you want. Maybe that is anti-Semitism, probably is. But it wasn't something I was part of. I certainly don't feel that way. But they were turned around, and where did they end up? They ended up in historic Palestine. Between 1920 and 1947, there were many, many hundreds of thousands that eventually ended up living in historic Palestine and were relatively unharmed and assimilated into the community among Arabs, Christian and Muslim, predominantly Muslim. And there's an interesting chart that shows the population changes from 1500 to 1948. And it predominantly changes from very, very few Jewish people making up like 1 or 2% of the population to making up, 30 or 40% of the population in 1945 after World War II. And of course, after World War II, there was even more of an influx given what happened, right? Which is understandable. But the question is, why should one group of people have to suffer to provide a sanctuary for others? Which is a fair question. Why is it that the British, who had a mandate post-World War II, decide we're just going to carve this up and give it to somebody without consulting with the other and saying, hey, dude, you're out of luck, tough luck, right? I wouldn't want someone to do that to me. I would imagine that most people who are Jewish, who are Zionist-minded, wouldn't want that done to them. And I always like to say, if the tables were turned and in 1927 or 28 there was conversation behind the scenes between the British and, let's say, the Jordanians, and they decided they were going to take over half the territory and basically kick out ethnic Jewish people that had lived there for several generations and had culture and had relationships and whole systems set up, and then they get the boot one day. I would be the same criticism I would levy against the Arab government or Arab movement, whether it was based on Islam or some other belief system, for doing what they did to others that didn't deserve it, right? It's about the behavior, not who's doing it. And a lot of times I'll get hit with the accusation that I hate Jewish people, or that I love the H group, or that I'm against the state of Israel altogether. I'm not against necessarily the quote-unquote safe place for Jewish people to be, but in terms of how it came to be and the way it came to be with the harm, sorry, that's my dog, I'm against that. And I do understand that people from Israel mean that they think that everyone's going to be unalived. The people weren't being unalived en masse in 1940 and 1948. They weren't. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. Yeah, for some reason when anybody walks down the hall of my building, she freaks the hell out. Anyway, this is how I feel. Listen, I'm not right per se. This is just one take. But people say, why do you always root for Palestinians? You're against Israelis. You must hate Jews. No. It's not about that. But I will say this. The predominant mindset, I find it very unpleasant when I hear people on these lives talking, and they talk from a position of great arrogance and dismissiveness of the other. And they look down on people. It's a very condescending way to look at the world. It's very selfish. So I was on one last night, like I talked about, or very late in the morning, actually, because I happened to fall asleep on the couch, and then I woke up and I saw this live going on. I was like, it was just bullshit, basically. So I got on for a second, and I pointed that out. I was trying to talk about it, the similarities between what the H group did on the 7th, which I believe was a resistance to ongoing oppression of occupation and a blockade. And other people see it differently. They think it was an unprovoked, like everything was fine on the 6th, then these people attacked us, they wanted to go to war with us. Well, I mean, that's one interpretation you can say, but everything's fine for you sitting pretty on the other side of oppression when your government is doing the oppressive things to others. Well, it wasn't fine for them. That's the point. And if you think about what happened, a lot of people who are supportive of Israel come from the United States. There's a large Jewish population here, many of whom support Zionism and the Zionist movement and safety, security for Israel. I understand their point of view, but they're not taking into account the fact that others have been living under a warlike situation for decades. And occupying another territory militarily is an act of war, as is a siege and blockade where another power controls what comes. It's an act of war. So to say that somebody resisting that act of war is somehow unprovoked or that it's not permitted for them to resist, that is absurd. Like I said, he flipped the tables. There was something called the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Was that to be condemned? Or was that to be understandable given the circumstances? Of course. I think it makes sense. I wouldn't condemn a more militant version of Jewish people who were being oppressed by the Germans for trying to fight back however they could. Now, was it successful? No, it didn't turn the tide. But it's what you can do. They didn't call the Germans up and say, can you please position 500 SS guards and soldiers so we can have a fair fight on Saturday? Right? They did what they did when they could, how they could. Same thing in America. We call the people who were able to liberate the colonists who liberated from the British occupation back in the 1700s, we called them patriots, freedom fighters, because they used unconventional tactics to shift the balance of power in their favor of those who wanted to be liberated from occupation. Right? Makes sense? Same variables, different location, same general variables. So what happened? The British, when they came in to occupy the country, they took property from the American colonists. They took houses that were built and owned on plantations from Americans. They just kicked you out, just like what happened during the Nakba. Tough luck, we're here, deal with it. So what did the colonists do? In many cases, they would go into a property, they'd sneak onto the property, and they would unalive everything on the property. Not because they wanted to hurt civilians. It's not about that. It's about doing what you can, how you can, to create disruption and fear in your enemy so that you can hopefully attain a bigger, longer-term goal. Now, I'm not for unaliving of children and women and any civilian, ever. However, I understand it within a broader context, and I think that anybody who's completely powerless, for the most part, under the military of a heavily armed, much better armed opponent, would have to do what they can, when they can, how they can. You can't go stand outside in front of the British and stand person to person and get shot at. You're going to be gone. They have the power structure against you. You have to use the power you have, which is mobility and stealth and unconventional tactics to overcome your enemy. Right? That's considered guerrilla tactics. And that's what the H group uses right now vis-a-vis what's happening with the troops moving into Gaza. And that's what they tried to do in terms of going in to capture hostages. Because if you don't know, many, many people from the West Bank have been held in Israeli prisons for many, many years for no charges, or very minor charges that get escalated to ridiculous sentences. And those people are basically hostages, 7,000 plus people for a long time, many of whom are living in horrific conditions. I did a video and I showed someone who just returned he was one of the prisoners that got swapped out, and he told a horrific story of how he was mistreated inside of Israeli prison. And meanwhile, you juxtapose that to the prisoners who were released by the H group, and you see them walking them to the vehicle, and they're looking friendly to each other, and they're saying, thank you, take care. They're being cordial to each other, if not warm. And of course, nobody from the Israeli side wants to portray the H group as anything other than absolute barbarians. They want to take away their humanity. They want to make them look like they're completely evil, which is understandable, but it's not true. It's part of the propaganda machine. So, listen, it's combat, it's war, it's not pretty. And sometimes things happen that no one wants to do, but it happens because it's in the mix of things, and I get that too. But look at what the Israeli military has been doing vis-a-vis their hostages. A lot of Israeli citizens are mad as hell. They say, bring them back now. And the government's basically saying, well, we're going to use our Hannibal directive, Hannibal doctrine. And that's basically when you shoot first, ask questions later, because you're trying to get the bad guys, quote unquote. And if you have to get some good guys in the process, so be it. Right? So therefore, what happens? There were 3 Israeli captives that came out, took their shirts off, were waving a white flag, and the Israeli occupation forces shot and unalived them because they've been told, if it moves, shoot it. Which is a blatant war crime, right? You can't just blatantly unalive everything in sight and destroy everything in sight. People say in World War II, the U.S. did it to the Germans, right? They carpet bombed places like Dresden and different circumstances, much different circumstances. The Germans weren't occupying the United States thing. They were doing other things in the arena. But what the U.S. and the British did to Dresden were a totally different set of circumstances against a much more aggressive enemy. The aggression of the H group was a small incursion where a tiny fraction, as horrible as it was, a tiny, tiny fraction of the Israeli civilian population were unalived, and many of whom were soldiers, and many of whom were unalived because of the Israeli military response. We don't know the exact numbers. But the point is that you can't blame the H group. And also all these atrocities that are being talked about, like first there was the 40 babies, debunked. Then there was the mass raping of women, debunked. Now, they say they have video evidence, being the Israelis. They say, oh, I've seen the video. Trust me, it's bad. Okay, let's put aside the trust for a second. Show the video. If you want to, mute out people's faces, dark, whatever. If you have to protect the identity or the family, just show the acts happening, right? You don't have to show much of it. You can even blur the whole thing out. But no, take our word for it. We got the evidence. Okay? That's not a stand. You can't go to court and say that to a judge. Hey, judge, by the way, trust me, this person did this. What? Do you have any evidence? Nope, but trust me. I got the video, but I'm not going to show it to you because it's too sensitive to my family. Judge is going to say, get the hell out of here, right? As they should. So, who knows? But the bottom line is the Palestinian struggle continues. And it's going to continue. And this is what I think most people in Israel don't understand. The people that are tied to their land are so tied to it along with their faith that they will never, ever, ever relent. Ever. You will have to unalive every last one of them or somehow physically force them off their land. Otherwise, they will never go away. Ever. They have the resolution that is 100% unbreakable. And I've seen that for decades. I've seen interviews with Palestinian leaders that have been unalived, targeted sass in nation. And they say, the interviewer will say, why can't you just make peace? And they're like, what peace? Like, well, why can't you sit down and talk with them? What's there to talk about? And the bottom line is, if you have an adversary that does not negotiate in good faith, ever, and only offers you more of the same, with maybe a little more land, but more of the same power dynamic, where they're controlling you all the time, that's not a peace deal. That's a settlement with control by the enemy forever. That's not having autonomy. That's not an outcome that can be said, because you're going to have the same feeling of being subjected to somebody else's rule. Right? What if the British would have said, well, I'll tell you what, you can have a little more involvement in the local economy and we'll drop your tax rate by 3%. What do you say? Be like, F you, get the hell out, right? Now, is it practical that the entire landmass that's been created in Israel is going to go away at this point? Probably not, barring some sort of massive conflict that forces that to happen. So the H group realized that in 2017. If you don't know, they revised their charter. And yeah, I think what they said about the unaliving of all Jewish people as a part of their mission, I can understand the anger relating to the historic wrong that was happening to their grandparents and all the subsequent feelings that come with all that aggravation and stress and indignity of all that, and the way you're humiliated and mistreated for decades. I get the anger. And I know it's understandable to try to put anybody who's a symbolic representation of that anger in front of you and say, I want to get rid of those people because they did something really wrong. They need to go. I get that thinking. But that's not the thinking that helps, because many people who live there don't necessarily support what happened even back then. They just like me, I happen to be born genetically here out of no choice of my own. I didn't vote for what my forefathers did in the 1820s by going across the country and basically obliterating the people that were indigenous, right? I don't support that. If I was alive in 1820, I would speak out against it, I guess. Maybe not, I don't know. But I don't like it. So in the similar way, you can't just say to a whole group of people, I want to get rid of you. Because that is a genocidal way of thinking. And that's what the Israelis use as an excuse to say. And the funny thing is, the Israelis are the one actually carrying out a mass unaliving of another group of people, whatever term you want to put on it. A lot of people, including myself, put the term genocide. But they're very cavalier with respect to how they're conducting themselves and allowing themselves a lot of allowance to do things that are not being careful about civilians, right? That's the best way to put it. But the same thing goes on the other side. You have to take it both ways. You can't have it one way and not the other. So I'm glad that they revised their charter, because what they changed, if you don't know, you can look it up, type in 2017 revised age group charter. You can spell it on the internet. And it says that even though they're not going to recognize the state, the Zionist entity, which is what they call it. They don't even call it the state. They refuse to even use the language. They understand that it's probably in the best interest to have a two-state solution where they're willing to have Palestinians live within the pre-1967 borders, which means the entirety of the West Bank, the Israelis have to move their military totally out, give them full autonomy, no more control points. They can protect their own borders, of course. But in return, the Palestinians would give them freedom from, attack. They would have security guarantees because the reason they're attacking is because of the occupation. They don't get up every day and say, I did a tweet about this. I said, what is driving the H group? What motivates the H group? Abject hatred of Jewish people? Nope. Freedom from occupation and blockade? Yep. That was my tweet. It's gotten like a gazillion retweets and stuff because that is what's going on. That is the premise of all this. And the claim that all this group wants to do is unalive Jewish people is a excuse to pummel them into submission because of what they did. It's a revenge-based retaliation which serves the long-term goals of most people who are hardcore Zionists. Let's be real. That's what's going on. The question is, what's going to come out of this? When will the destruction stop, and what will it look like? All of northern Gaza is gone. If you've not seen the photographs or pictures, they've leveled everything from Gaza City north for the most part. It's gone. They've turned it into a parking lot, like some people said. Turned it into a parking lot. They've done that. The rubble and destruction, it looks worse than Syria. It looks worse than World War II. It's like it's absolutely destroyed. It's unlivable. No one can go back and live there, even if they want to go back and everybody lets them back. You can't live there. It's like the best you can do is try to pitch a tent between the rubble. It's going to take, like what happened in Japan with the tsunami. It looks like that. It's just utter devastation. So that is a form of collective punishment, right? By cutting off the water, fuel, food, electricity, medicine. You cut all of these things off, you level a place, people are forced to displace themselves. They didn't voluntarily leave. They just decided to go set. No, they didn't. You drop leaflets, which is very kind of you before you destroy the entire landscape. How benevolent of you. You drop leaflets, says go south. Then you drop stuff on people while they're driving south or migrating south. What a scumbag. Who does this? Then they tell people you'll be safe in the south. Then they just start dropping shit there. There's nowhere to go that's safe. You're walled in. The sea, which you could normally try to swim out, is blockaded by a naval blockade. And it's armed to the teeth. And they say, well, they say the Egyptians should just open things up and let people out there. Why don't they do that? And the idea is, if the Egyptians were to let everybody leave and come out to the desert temporarily, do you think that the Israelis will ever let them back into Gaza? No way. No way. The people aren't going to go. Let's face it, they are not going to go. If you see any of the reports that are coming back, their spirits are high in the face of absolute devastation. There's an outbreak of hepatitis A that's happening. If you don't know what hepatitis A is, it is bad. And it's very, very contagious. Look it up. So, hey, Jage, thanks for supporting me. Appreciate it. So that dynamic's not going to change. So we'll have to see what the Israeli government's going to do. You have to wonder what their real goal is, because if you can look at what's happening, right? You have troops moving through. They've leveled everything in the north. You have like almost 1.8 million people that are refugees now, just nowhere to go, half of whom are children. So just think of this for a second. I mean, somebody did a video about this yesterday. It was really good. This happened to a young woman. She lost one of her legs, not both, but the woman said both. But she was a 13-year-old girl, and she got her leg damaged in a munition being dropped, let's put it that way. One of her legs she had to have it amputated without anesthesia. So imagine going through that alone. Then 2 days later, she was sitting in a hospital near one of the windows, and that got hit. So she went through the devastation of losing her whole family. She was the last survivor, had one of her legs cut off at the pelvis with no anesthesia, was recovering in a bed, and then got blown up. Now think of the indignity of that. Just how horrible that is. This is the crap that these people do. They don't care. They don't appear to care about the lives of people on the other side. And that's why I did a video this morning. And the video says the people in the blue and white don't like it when they actually see what happens when they F around and find out. Or something to that effect. Not the exact language. And then it shows like a 20-second video clip of people being absolutely devastated by their family members and friends who have not made it through the battles. Because if you don't know, anybody can drop something from the air like a complete coward and just blast anything in sight. Half the munitions that have been dropped are not guided, even though they say we're precision based. And you see what happened in Beirut recently when that senior H group leader, who by the way was meeting to craft a ceasefire, so trying to figure out a way to have peace, and the Israelis targeted him with a Hellfire missile from a drone, and it precisely struck the second floor on one side of a building and took him out along with some other people, right? Now that is a very targeted activity. Well, if you have the ability to be targeted and you say you're going after the H group, why are you dropping non-guided munitions onto a civilian area and just let it go? So your claim is debunked by your own behavior, right? Hey Viv, how you doing? Thanks for your support and always. So again, everything, it just sickens me so much. The more I see, the more I learn about how Israel chooses to behave. Their choice towards another group of people, it makes me sick to my stomach at every turn. And yeah, am I sickened by what happened to civilians on 10/7? Because they always comes back to, well, what about the women? What about the... Yes, I agree. I don't agree with hurting civilians ever. But go back to my country again. Our forefathers, to liberate our country from British occupation, did the same exact thing. Maybe more over time. I don't know the exact numbers. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander, my friend. If you live in the United States, you would not be here safe and sound. If you're somebody who supports Israel and you support Zionism, you would not be here able to do that had it not been for those very actions that you're condemning on the part of the H group that were done by our forefathers. Can't have it both ways, right? Somebody's asking me what's my aspect on the court case in Hague on Thursday. Yeah, this is the International Court of Justice that's petitioning WAR crimes against Israel. South Africa is pushing it to the ICJ. There's a 38-page document. I've skimmed it. It's a very strong case. It puts out specific statements by the leaders and the congruent behavior that's happened militarily since they put those statements out. So the two tend to work together with intent, which is an important part of a G-side charge, is you have to show intent. So yeah, somebody says nothing will happen. So let me second that. There may be a conviction where the charges are brought and they decide they meet the standard and there's a conviction level. Now the question about laws is you can be convicted by any court. The question is what happens next. They're being convicted in what's called absentia. They're going to have lawyers there on their behalf fighting it, but they're not the actual people named in the leadership. So they don't have possession being 9/10 of the law. They don't have possession of the physical bodies of the people. So they can't arrest them. So how do you get to the people? It's like an Interpol thing. They can't step into territory where they'd be arrested. That's the only time something would happen. So if they were to travel to a country that's an adherent to the treaty, they'd be quote unquote under obligation to arrest them. Same thing with Putin right now, right? People say if Putin travels that these countries should arrest him. Now some countries are party to these conventions, and for political reasons they choose not to enforce that, right? So Putin has traveled to places where parties, and they have not arrested him, and people are angry about that, but that's a whole other story. So somebody's asking about the Epstein list. The Epstein list that was put out was watered down. It didn't include all the real names. It was talked up and talked up and talked up as if it was going to be the big reveal, and then it was a tip of the little baby iceberg. So I don't think we'll ever get the real names, and there are a lot of bad people that have done a lot of bad things that are under the thumb of those who are blackmailing them with that, according to reports. So somebody says Noam Chomsky's in on it. Listen, you got to remember that people are people. They have desires. They do things behind closed doors that they never talk about publicly, whatever it may be, some of which are beyond comprehension. Some of them involve sexual desires that maybe work with underage people to some extent. Some of them are worse, with rituals that are more harmful than just that, which is bad enough, right? And I don't have the evidence, but I have a lot of allegations that tie people into that behavior. And there's no justification for that behavior, and I think publicly outing people for their misdeeds is the least we can do, and hopefully hold them accountable. But remember, you have the most powerful people, and there's a whole network of them who have been caught up in this because they were lured into it. Somebody named Jeffrey Epstein and this person, Ghislaine Maxwell, who has ties to Robert Maxwell, who has ties to Israel, big time. Again, a lot of people argue that this was orchestrated as a way to create leverage on powerful people to get certain things accomplished that wouldn't have probably have otherwise been able to be accomplished, right? Somebody says I skipped their Dershowitz comment. Yeah, Alan Dershowitz is the lawyer that's been hired by the Israeli government to go into The Hague and defend this case against the South African claim. And if you know anything about Alan Dershowitz, he wrote a book called The Case for Israel. He's a U.S. lawyer, famous for defending. He actually defended Jeffrey Epstein at one point during his criminal past, but says he has nothing to do with it. As if he went on an interview recently and said, well, I have nothing to hide, because he knew the report coming out wasn't going to include his stuff. That's it. So people like Norman Finkelstein, who writes the truth about what happens in Israel historically, as well as these bullshit agreements, he gets ostracized and kicked out and loses tenure. People like Dershowitz, who are protected by the establishment, which is a lot of pro-Israel, pro-Jewish folks, protect people of their same kind. Not surprising, but sickening all the while, right? So, does anybody want to come up and talk? My mouth is getting worn out from talking. Let me get a glass of water real quick. I wanted to ask a question to the group. So if you don't mind, there's different formats for doing these lives, right? I normally have one guest at a time, like a radio talk show, which I kind of enjoy because it's more manageable. And when I do have more than one, I try to do my best to keep it manageable. But sometimes if you get people on different sides of an issue, they tend to talk over. I've tuned into people's lives before. They're unwatchable, right? The host sits back and lets the chaos ensue. And I'm like, host, please mute somebody. Like what? But and then sometimes I get kicked off of their lives. Like people are really rude. So, yeah, the other point somebody brought up about plagiarism, if you don't know much about Dershowitz, Norman Finkelstein and Dershowitz have had arguments on Democracy Now!, the show hosted by Amy Goodman. And by the way, I know I'm not noticing all your comments, but please don't do all the all caps because it's a little bit annoying to everybody else. I'll just put that down there. And sometimes the moderators will mute you if you keep doing that. I don't want you to get muted. So, anyway, so, a lot of bad people in this world, right? And Dershowitz, they say that somebody's saying that Dershowitz was falsely exonerating for having plagiarized much of his book. And again, Norman Finkelstein called him out and asked him if he had any notes, because most authors, when they write a draft, either a word processor, and then they use that to finalize their other edits. And so Norman Finkelstein in these debates said, "Can you provide any evidence that you worked on the book with any sort of notes or outlines or anything?" And he refused to provide anything. So if I was somebody who wrote a book and somebody challenged me, I'd send them my fucking notes. I'm like, well, I don't care. Take my notes, dude. So yeah, it's good for Amy Goodman from Democracy Now! If you don't know what Democracy Now! is, it's an independent media organization that is one of the best, not perfect, because their coverage on Ukraine and Donald Trump is reprehensible. It's not unbiased, but they give you information that you don't get from most of the typical media outlets. They talk about the Israel-Palestine issue they've been very good on for decades. But other issues like the pandemic, especially more recently, they've gotten some money from some sources. Who knows whether it's influencing them or not? But they're a business and they're trying to stay afloat. And sometimes you got to do what you got to do. But yeah, a lot of people say Amy Goodman's a gatekeeper. I agree. I think there's some controlled opposition that goes on sometimes in these empires, and they do cover some stuff that I find helpful because I get some information about, especially like conflicts over in Africa and places where we don't hear much on the mainstream. They just ignore it. And sometimes they'll cover that kind of news, which I find helpful. At least it gives you a sense of what's going on. But other issues, they seem kind of compromised, right? The Ukraine war, horrible coverage. Donald Trump, more of the same BS you hear on the mainstream media from the left. Unfair coverage. They still use the word, insurrection when it comes to what happened on January 6th. I think that's absurd. A lot of people disagree with me. But after looking into it in depth, I don't think how you can come to any other conclusion if you spend time really digging through what happened. And if you do, that's fine. But I disagree. But what I wanted to ask you was, in terms of format, this is the audience, probably my core audience, because it's a Saturday. We have about 100 people. Would you like to see, if you would like to see this, please type the number 1. Would you like to see me bring up more people on a panel and have me sort of sit back a little more and let them present? Would you like to see that? Press the number 1 if you'd like to see more of that. Or if you more prefer me, you can type in 2. Because I get a lot of complaints from Instagram. I was forwarding my videos or no, the ones that I found on TikTok, I was just sending them over. The ones that I reposted, I would send them to Instagram. And I got DMs from Instagram saying, dude, stop sending us other people's videos. Send us your videos. So anyway, so yeah, I mean, what I want to do is I want to give you, the audience, what you want. So somebody says a mix. Somebody says a combo would be great. There's a lot of twos coming in, which is gratifying. So listen, again, it gives me a break a little bit, right? Because, you know, I can talk a lot, as you well know. But at some point, it's good to have a mix. So what I'm thinking of doing is having one night a week be like an open mic night for panelists to come on. And then I can regulate the panel, much like Eric does. Or maybe I'll do it on a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Because if you don't know who Eric Warsaw is, spelled with a K, he has a really popular panel show like that. He moderates it, and they'll talk about a few issues and let people come on. And he does a great job. But he and I overlap on the Monday, Wednesday, Friday time frame. He starts at 7 p.m. and usually goes like 4 or 5 hours. So I may do it on the midday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And if you guys don't know, there's a guy named the Handsome Liberal named Tim. He always has a MAGA hat, and even though he calls himself the Handsome Liberal, he's more conservative. He's also an Uber driver. So that's how I met him, through looking at Uber videos. But he does a really interesting, he does like a radio show. He talks about some stuff, and then he lets some people call in one at a time like I do. And I sent a message to Tim saying I've been a follower of his, and so I'm looking to get more guests on too. So if you're aware of people that you'd like to see on with me, I have a list of like 30 people that I've been bumping into and I would love to get on here. Some from outside of TikTok and some from within the community. But there are a lot of people that do really good videos, but they never go live. So what I want to do, like for example, James Ray, the guy that wears that Purdue, ski hat, and then he's got his long hair and a beard. I'd love to get him on a live because he makes some great videos. He's got like 350,000 followers or whatever it is, like 280. And I never see them on lives. So you get to learn more about the person, their background, how they get started, that kind of stuff. So between bringing people onto lives and getting more guests on a panel, I think that might make the show a little more, rounded out. So, oh yeah, how you doing? Oh, there's Eric. Hey, Eric. I was just talking about your show. I don't know if you heard me, but I was just talking to the audience about maybe doing one a little more similar to yours and not doing it when you're doing yours, because if you don't know what Eric does, and by the way, Eric does a tremendous job. If you haven't checked out Eric Warsaw, he just stopped by in the chat to say hey while he was at work. First of all, he's just a nice person, right? And secondly, he does a great job. He's got a show he's been doing for I don't know how long, but very consistent, always the same thing. You get the same quality every single night after night. He's never late. He just does what he does. It's from 7 p.m. Eastern time until usually late, like 11 o'clock. He does like a 3, 4, 5 hour format. And you get to come on. He does turns. You get to take your turn, say what you want. He gets pro-Israel and pro-Pally. A lot of times more Pally because, I think that's the more reasonable point of view. But every once in a while he gets some people that are, and they get into some conversations that are really deep and they talk about a bunch. So if you haven't checked out Eric Warsaw, please do. Now listen, I'm promoting somebody who has his live show at the same time I have mine. I'm not trying to kick people off of my audience. But it's all about messaging, not about the people. So the goal is awareness and the goal is information and learning. And I think Eric's very good about doing that. He's got some really interesting polls they do too. So I try to tune into his show as much as I can, even as a listener. And then once in a while I'll come on and Eric's always nice enough to bring me up. So good on you, Eric. You're one of the good eggs in the world. Thank you for being you. Yeah, we can also do more news-related stuff. I mean, a lot of times I talk general. I'm more of an analyst than a news person. But, that's my strength. I'm not as good. I can start doing the news. I mean, a lot of people will take a little studio program and they'll bring up articles or video and they'll talk about them. What I really want to do, I like doing interviews, like street interviews with people, because it shows you the power of propaganda. I love to ask people about their point of views on foreign leaders, for example, or situations like what we're seeing now, and then just letting them talk. I don't challenge them at all, or maybe give them things to think about, but don't get into deep conversation. Just bring in the information and then put it in a video and show you, hey, this is what's going on out there. This is how people really think, and this is how bad it is as far as the belief system. This is what we're up against, right? But again, I talk about ways to get past some of these problems with giving people resources. Life in Occupied Palestine, Al-Nakba, the documentary, the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, Gaza Fights for Freedom. I'm going to put these in my link tree, by the way, because I always talk about these. Yeah, people, we talked about the election. I've been on a lot of other people's lives about the election coming up. And I do think the presidential election matters. I think the congressional race is a little less so. But the bigger issue still, if you don't know this or not, maybe I can talk about this. Elected officials are appointed by the ruling class. You're not electing somebody who decided to run. Even Trump, he wouldn't be allowed to run if he didn't have enough that protected the ruling class from getting what they want. Trust me, he wouldn't be allowed into office. They would find a way not, or if he ever got in, if they didn't like him, he would no longer be able to do it, if you know what I mean. So somebody says, I messaged you on Instagram. It's really important about a Gaza doctor who needs help. Okay, yeah, I'll look at that. You know, I do most of my work here on TikTok, so I've not been as good about checking my DMs on Instagram. So the best way to reach me, in my link tree, if you really want to reach me, you can either catch me on Telegram, which I check that every day, and I check my email. So my email address is it's at the very bottom now of my link tree. It says email me. So if you need to contact me, do it there. Please, if it's something that's not directly related to what I do, I mean, as much as I don't mind hearing from you because I want to be in good relation with everybody, but I try to limit that to just stuff that's related to, either the work I'm doing to try to fix this stuff up or issues related to requests for content or people I can meet. Just no personal stuff if you don't mind. I mean, I'd love to meet you sometime, but I can only cover so much ground. It just gets clogged up, right? We know how that works with email. So yeah, please do. And by the way, I've had people contact me asking me to put their fundraiser on my link tree. I've had somebody ask me for $4,000 yesterday. Well, I please send them $4,000 to help them pay off their father's debts and so they can start a small business. I'm not shitting you. Somebody asked me to do that. I'm like, okay, I sent it. They gave me the wire instructions. I said, yeah, I sent the funds just for fun. But, my goal eventually, just if you don't know, is to have a podcast, which is fun to do. Probably there's a million of them now, so who knows if it'll even make the radar. And then get on some other people's stuff, like go onto people's platforms who have a lot more followers, and hopefully we can bring more people over to learn this stuff. And there's some good people on my Twitter. I mention this a lot. If you go to my Twitter, which is, again, in my link in bio, it says Linktree Chip Barnes at the top. And if you click on that, it'll launch like a little list. It's on this site called Linktree, which is it's a shortcut to seeing someone else's stuff, basically. So on my Twitter feed, it's just my name, Chip Barnes. I have a list of all the people that I've run into over the years that are great to follow. I mean, in my opinion, they're not compromised. They try to reach the truth. They put out good content. Some of them are writers on Substack. Some of them are on Twitter. Some of them are on YouTube, or some of them are more than one. And their styles may not appeal to you. I mean, I follow Jackson Hinkle, who's been barred from most platforms. Jackson's style can be a bit snarky or even a little bit misogynistic and a little bit crude. And that's not me. But I try to look past that stuff and look at the core information that's being put out as far as the value of that. Darker Man, we've been talking about a bunch of stuff like usual. I bounce around, but we talked a little bit about Gaza. We've talked a little bit about the protest that's coming up. I'll say that again for those of you who are coming on. There's a protest taking place, a pro-Palestinian protest. It's going to be January the 13th at 1 p.m. in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital of the United States, at the mall, the National Mall, which is this massive section of downtown D.C. by all the major buildings and all the museums. So somebody says, what's going on with Lebanon? Well, here's the thing with Lebanon. Lebanon is involved in this big time. And what's happening in Lebanon is the Israelis have been trying to basically goad the Lebanese into the war. The reason why they want the Lebanese to enter the war is, A, it draws into a broader conflict and increases the likelihood that the U.S. will then come in and be forced to militarily back the Israelis. And they want that because they're having a really hard time fighting the H group in Gaza, obviously. So, yeah, I'll be there, Suda. I created, just again, getting back to my link tree, if you want to coordinate going there, I have one person who's going to be flying in, who's going to stay with me. I offered my place for somebody, so they're going to stay with me. We're going to go together. I created a group called January 13th Protest. It's in my link tree in my bio. It's a Telegram group. So if you want to coordinate meeting up or just talk about the event or whatever, go there, and that's where we're doing that. Okay. If you go to my link tree, listen, I have all sorts of cool resources. We talk about the political dynamic being very hard to get past the voting process. We're seeing that now with this. There's going to have to be some other path, right? Well, that path is going to have to involve organization. So I have a link that relates to that. So we have to put our quote unquote money where our mouths are. We're all complaining and bitching, but complaining and bitching doesn't do anything unless there's a solution, right? And not every problem can be solved, but we can at least have better adaptations to an otherwise, insurmountable problem. And that's the key. And by the way, like anything in your life, right? You may not be able to fix it, but you can do what you can do. I mean, what happened on the 7th didn't fix the problem for Palestinians, right? But it was something that they could do. And what happened because of it? A, they got some hostages that they can hopefully exchange at some point. That was the goal there. But more importantly, they raised the awareness of this issue to a much broader audience. From a political standpoint, even though it was horrible what happened to all the people involved, it just completely changed the way that the world views this. It's become center stage, right? It wasn't center stage on October 6th by any means. Only the few weirdos like me that have been following it for decades are even aware of it, right? So, Sweden, why don't you elaborate on that? In fact, there's somebody who wants to come up. So, okay, we have one of our supporters, Gigi, who wants to come up and talk. Let's see what is on the mind.
Hey, Chip. Hey, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well today. I just wanted to circle back with you. I had sent you a video regarding a young woman who is in nuclear disarmament.
Right, I
And
saw it.
there is some treaty that the U.S. entered in, and I might be misremembering this video a little
Yeah.
bit, but there was some treaty that the U.S. entered into in the late 60s, early 70s.
Yep.
I can't remember the parties to it, but their agreement makes it illegal for any of those parties to share weapons with countries that are that have or are trying to have nuclear weapons.
Right.
So I think I'm understanding it correctly in that it is illegal for us to send any type of weapon, not just
Yeah.
nuclear,
Right.
to any country who is trying to acquire nuclear weapons. And there was a follow-up video she did to that where she actually found a treaty that Israel entered into. I think it was either Spain or Italy, where they were going to, in concert, help each other develop nuclear weapons. So
Mm.
she found confirmation that basically Israel admitting that they were uh, creating nuclear weapons. And
Okay.
now so then any transfer of weapons to them is now illegal. In this coming on the back of what South Africa is doing, I'm wondering, is there anything, and I don't know any federal attorneys, but is there anything that we as the citizens can do as far as suing them to at least cause a pause in transferring any more weapons? And then I'll drop. Thanks.
All right, thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, so the bottom line is there's an existing law in the books, but again, we talked about laws being only as good as the enforcement capability. Right now, the way that Congress is set up, even if the government were to be sued for non-enforcement or not following that particular law, they would pass some temporary measure to allow for a temporary cessation from following that law just to keep supporting Israel. So it would not be adhered to, which is again more hypocrisy by the United States. They set rules and they don't follow them. It's just part of the playbook, unfortunately. And I don't believe the thing. Listen, it's very good that it's just like with Trump, right? Some people are happy that Trump was found liable for a civil suit for what happened with E. Jean Carroll up in New York State. And yes, he got convicted. That's like a black mark on his record. Now, does it completely stop him from doing everything he does? No, but it is a sort of like it's on the record, so to speak. And so similarly, so will this be if this goes through the International Court of Justice and it's successful, and they do get charged with some or all of the crimes that are mentioned in the petition. Then it will be a black mark not only on Israel and the leadership and the soldiers that implemented this, but on the United States, who's been complicit in supplying the weaponry and the money and the military support and the political backing at the UN to allow it to continue. So that's pretty bad. I think the reputations of all parties involved have been more than soiled beyond saving. And I don't think it's possible for the US or Israel to ever have any kind of good standing in the world ever again. This is not something you come back from or somehow, are able to kind of paper mache over in the future. So in the one way, again, there's been more political tension than ever put towards Palestinian causes, which is a great thing, even though it's been horrific. And then secondly, the United States, I mean, listen, all the true colors are out, right? Let's face it, all the talk, all the propaganda about the most moral army in the world by Israel, and all this talk about freedom and democracy, that's out the window now, right? The whole world knows the story. So now it's a question of what's going to happen next. And anybody who aligns with the US is going to be complicit as well. So at some point, if there is a war, a major conflict between Iran, China, and Russia, and whomever else is involved, maybe North Korea, against the US, Western Europe, and Israel, as much as I don't want to see harm come to my country, just like the bully, it's the same dynamic. I think if you're completely taking advantage of people and doing bad things, you kind of deserve what you get, right? And I don't know what'll happen there. I mean, listen, I don't want to get blown up in a bomb or whatever. I certainly don't want there to be nuclear exchanges because that's really horrible for the environment, although I think the people, the leadership deserve it, right? But not necessarily the people who are just in the country living. But by using those weapons, it affects everybody equally. The nuclear bomb doesn't discriminate. So that's why they're so incredibly dangerous. And it can cause long-term damage in terms of things going up in the atmosphere, and then you can't, things don't grow and you lose a lot of life. So it's very, very dangerous. Just so you know, I don't know, most people don't know this, but excuse me 1 second. I got to blow my nose. I don't want you guys. Trust me, you're glad you'd have to hear that. It's pretty nasty. So I don't, the whole thing the more I learn about what the U.S. does, if you haven't read books like Michael Parenti, read some books or go to YouTube and just listen to him. He's older now. He's in his 90s. But when he was in his 50s and 60s, he just hammered out some amazing content about what the U.S. does. I don't know how the hell he found all the stuff out, but having read what he read, having read Confessions of an Economic Hitman, having read a lot of Noam Chomsky stuff, you just get this picture of what the U.S. actually does in the world. And, for those who are waving the American flag around and saying USA, you got to check yourself. You got to understand what that actually means when you do that. Just like you see people going around and saying, there's these videos that were put on Twitter. I'm a Zionist, and that's not something to be proud of. What's being done in the name of Zionism right now is basically G-side, right? Massive unaliving of civilians, and it's reprehensible. All right. Oh, Eric's still here. Cool. See, well, actually, no. I think maybe Eric's. I don't know if Eric's still here or not. Eric, if you want to come up, I'd love to have you come up. If you have a minute at work, maybe you're busy and you're just keeping it on the background. Listen. Tia just said something interesting. She says, "I'm a single mother and I have a mortgage, and unfortunately, I can't stop working at all." Right? I think that's very common. Right? Let's think about that for a second. More and more people in the United States have gotten marginalized with inflation, cost of living. Everything's been more difficult. So the same job, same salary doesn't go where it used to. So you'd have to work more time, which is tough to do if you have kids. They may be in daycare during the day. You can't just leave them in someone else's care 24/7. You're supposed to be a mom or a dad, right? You have to take care of your kids. But they're making it ever more difficult for the average person to survive, which is even harder then to be a part of a mass movement, which is probably the most necessary thing to overcome these power dynamics. It's, again, the deck is severely stacked against the working class. And by the way, there really isn't a middle class anymore. For those of you who think there just isn't one. We have very wealthy people, and we have those that are struggling, and then those that have been struggling for decades, right? The lowest end of the spectrum. And more at that Thanksgiving dinner, the first 2 or 3 people go up and take half the food, right? And then the rest of people have to fight over what's left. And then the next 10 people take half of that, and then the other 990 people get to go fight for what's left. And that's the United States landscape. It sucks. But what's going to happen, in my opinion, is in order for things to change, I don't think voting is going to make enough of a difference. You can't get enough, quote, good people in to overcome the structure. And I even believe if you replaced everybody tomorrow morning, snap your fingers, we got all new people, all the bad wood is out, all the corrupt stuff. The power dynamics don't change. The same control systems that have been built over the last several decades, it will eventually work itself out to be the same setup. Because whenever you have a system of incentives that are the exact same incentives or the same punishments, people behave based on incentives and punishments, right? So that isn't the fault of the politicians. Are some of them scumbags that go along? Yeah, they're bad people, right? They know the system, they take it to their advantage, they make money off of insider trading, and they go along with the game. They get paid well. They do the revolving door. They're just kind of caught up in the whole money and power and go to the cocktail parties and ha ha ha. So a good person, unfortunately, gets overridden. The people that have all the money control who gets paid what. And then, if you fight against it, if you push back, you lose all support of those same people that you're supposed to suck up to. It's a rotten system. So the system's what has to change. And the problem is the system is backed up at the constitutional level by corporate personhood and money being speech. And those two things have to be changed along with campaign finance. Super PACs and lobbyists has to go away. And that's the only way to even have a chance. Now, there'll still be more, bribery goes on in every part of the government, and that'll probably still never go away, right, to some extent. But I think the penalties for interfering in politics should be life in prison without the possibility for parole. And no exceptions. If you get convicted, you go to jail. You can't be a part of society because you're corrupting. That's what China doesn't even do that. You know what they do? If you're found guilty of corruption in China, you know what happens to you? Very swift and very quick, back to the head, and they even charge the family for the item that penetrated the back of the skull. They don't play around. So you just don't do that stuff in China. If you step out of line in China, that's it. And people try to do it for money in terms of drug trafficking or other corruption, and they find out the hard way. Now, there's still a lot of corruption in China, by the way, don't get me wrong. And some of it is permissible within the party structure because it's greasing the party. But if you try to go out and make your own outside the party, you're in trouble. Anyway, Chinese society is fascinating. It really is, if you study it. But they're on the upswing, right? But they also have a lot of vulnerabilities in terms of their real estate market right now, and what could happen in Taiwan if they get involved there. So it's going to be interesting. So what do you think about the Mossad arrest in Turkey? Yeah, there was about 35, 40 people or so that were alleged to be spies, Israeli Mossad agents that are in Turkey. They kind of did like a perp walk. I don't know if you saw the video. They kind of had their heads down. They were kind of pushing them along like they do with like El Chapo. So, I don't know. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but it was a diverse group of people. It was men. There was some women. It looked like they were different types of people, not all. But trust me, people like the United States, Great Britain, and Israel, they have assets all around the world from an intelligence standpoint. Somebody says there was a few hundred in Ireland. Yeah, I mean, listen, the game that these states play is they try to figure out ways to get into different countries, whether it's through non-governmental organizations, employed at certain key companies, actually inside the government, and they try to get inside and get as much intelligence as they can, as long as they can. And why do they do that? The reason why they do that is they want to have the advantage. They want to know what other countries are thinking of doing. They want to be able to influence the domestic politics so that if and when they don't like what a leader's doing, if they're not going along with the plan, they can destabilize the country and get the person deposed and get somebody who's more favorable. Like Biden said when he went to Ukraine, if you don't know what happened there, Joe Biden was vice president and his son Hunter Biden was on the board of a gas company, not gasoline, natural gas, named Burisma. Now, what does Hunter Biden have to do with an energy company? Nothing. Why was he on the board of an energy company? Good question. No experience in the industry. Well, it was obvious he was there so that people could have access to the power structure of the U.S. So what happened, there was a prosecutor, an honest prosecutor, that was pursuing bribery charges against Burisma for their contracts they were getting. And that prosecutor was pursuing them very, very stringently and was going to find them guilty. It was about to happen. The people from Burisma who were using Hunter as an asset to get to the U.S. government contacted, this is the allegation, used Hunter to get to Joe Biden, who then came over to Ukraine and made some demands that required that the prosecutor be fired or they wouldn't receive the loan guarantees that they needed. They desperately needed money at the time. The government needed money to do things. And they wouldn't provide the loan guarantees unless they got rid of the prosecutor. That was the leverage that Biden put on them. And so the prosecutor was fired. And Biden talked about this publicly. And he said they were able to fire the guy, son of a bitch, he said. They fired the guy and they put somebody in who was steady. Steady, meaning they're not going to cause any problems. Or who was solid. He used the word solid. I'm sorry, solid. And that just goes to show you that it's out in the open. They're not even hiding it anymore. And so In those relationships, there are allegations that some of the money that flows through those relationships, the payoffs and stuff like that, 10% for the big guy is what were in the messages on WhatsApp that they found off of Hunter's laptop. 10% for the big guy. Well, who do you think the big guy is in Hunter's world? I mean, some stranger? Nope. So that was the reference to the John Doe, quote unquote, that everybody believes was the president. So those allegations are out there, right? And chances are, why does Joe Biden have $38 million of property, right? His total salaries only add up to about $7 million for his whole time in Congress. So there you go. Anyway, it's really discouraging. Okay, we have somebody in the guest queue. It's Abul Abed. Let's bring up Abul and see what Abul has to say to us. Hello, Abul.
Hi, Chip. How's it going?
Good, thanks.
Good. Chip, yesterday I was watching the news and I saw Blinken boarding Air Force One, and then when he got to the door, waved back. Well, as he was going up the steps, he was carrying his briefcase and what have you. Then he got to the door of the plane, turns back and waves at the reporters and what have you. I said, "Is this the president?" Last time I checked, it was, Biden was the president. I guess today as well, now on the news, he just arrived in Athens,
Yeah.
coming off of Air Force One, holding a press conference. Who's the president of the United States? I'm lost. Am I in another century or something? Or
No, I think there's a large presence of people in the Biden administration who have dual citizenship with Israel, who happen to be Jewish. So there's a lot of conjecture about that. I believe that Anthony Blinken is playing an incredibly powerful role with respect to U.S. policy. He and Jake Sullivan, who's the national security guy. So, between the chief of staff, Anthony Blinken, and Jake Sullivan, and I think those are the ones that are really pulling the strings right now.
But is anyone, in the administration allowed to, take Air Force One by themselves? Or, I mean, I thought it was strictly for the president.
I
That's what I
don't,
thought.
I'm not familiar with the rules of who can fly on it, but I would imagine it's a utility that can be used by anybody the president designates if he does.
Yeah, I guess it just struck me odd, that's all. You're right. I mean, probably if it's authorized by the president, then yeah, anybody could use it in the administration. You got a point there. Any word, I mean, on a ceasefire, anything you think is going to happen there to stop this G-side that's going on?
Nope, unfortunately, nothing.
Nothing on that. Okay. Thanks, Chip.
Absolutely.
I
Okay.
enjoy, stopping by every once in a while. Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's discouraging right now, right? That we're seeing this. It's been over 90 days now of just relentless, unaliving, ruthless slaughter of human beings for what? These are civilians that had nothing to do with the H group. You hear rhetoric coming out of Israeli officials saying things like they're all complicit. They're all H group. They all deserve whatever's coming to them. And you hear other arrogant people saying that they think that the representative government inside of Gaza, that the H group has to go, and that they're saying the Palestinian Authority has to go in the West Bank. It has to be replaced with some other international format. The arrogance of the Israelis is unbelievable. And listen, I believe firmly in my heart that even though there are some people who have anger towards Jewish people in general because they just hate the idea of what's happened to their families over the decades, and I can understand that anger, although I think it's counterproductive. But if they were able to get a state of their own, which is the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, under maybe a common authority that has some combination of local autonomy with maybe some group that's a splinter of H group, I don't think you can tell a group of people who can or can't govern them. Right? That's not your role. Your role is to make sure you have security, right? That should be the underlying thing. As long as you get security, let them guide themselves. So I do think there have to be security guarantees in whatever that outcome would be. Now, do I think that's going to happen? No. Look at the settlements that are completely peppered throughout the West Bank. Do you think the Israelis are going to walk away from 750,000 people? They should, but do you think they're going to? I doubt it. I think that's very unlikely. So that's not practical. But if they went to a single state solution from the Israeli perspective, you'd have more Arabs than Jews in the country. That would shift the entire balance of the so-called democracy if they had to relent to, which I don't think they would. Then it would really become like an apartheid system like South Africa. So boom, all of a sudden we have an explosion of guests here. So we have Canadian Shield, Sea-Tang, Aseya, and somebody who's got some flags and some Arabic that I don't read. So let's bring on Canadian Shield and then Sea-Tang. Sorry, I don't read Arabic. I wish I got to start learning some.
Hey, Chip.
Hello.
Yeah, I wanted to actually talk about what you were just talking about with Israel and potential after the conflict is over. Actually, just the other night, the defense minister of Israel, Gallant, came out and started outlining Israel's four corners plans for Gaza after the conflict's done. And
Yeah.
essentially, nothing's going to change. They want to maintain full security control of Gaza. The
Yep.
occupation is not going to end.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's really bad. I mean, this has been the problem all along, right? So every single arrangement that the Israelis have desired to, what they've offered up for a solution, quote unquote, has never relinquished control of any form. So Israel always wants to maintain control for what they claim to be security purposes, but it's dubious at best. And they've talked about a quote path to peace, which is meaningless. So I think the desire over the years, it's hard to dispute this, is that they've had a desire to continue pushing and bit by bit, location by location, taking over more and more land and further displacing people. And it's just a slow motion genocide. Now we've seen it ramped up and sped up to an extent where it's been more people that have been unalive since the original Nakba in 1948. And it's just with no end in sight. And then you add in the humanitarian aspect of it with the lack of medical supplies and the disabled medical system because of all the bombings. And you have this complete recipe for total disaster. And that's what we're seeing. So the humanitarian part could start to unalive more people than the actual, destruction of property.
well, yeah, that's the other thing they've been saying recently is Israel's looking to outsource its genocide. It wants to voluntarily resettle Gazans to the Congo, the other place on the planet where
Yeah,
there's a huge
I heard that.
genocide going on. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
But
terrible.
But I would what's come out now, and I would recommend everyone take some time to read it, even if it takes you a while because it's a big document. Is South Africa's what they're submitting to the ICC for their case of genocide against Israel has been released in full.
Yeah,
So I've just started dipping into it a little bit, but I'd recommend
yeah.
people grab that PDF and review it.
Yeah, the other thing you can do, again, a lot of us don't have time to read 38 pages or even the inclination. I get that because we're used to being, quickly fed with video. There's a YouTuber who I really like. He's from England, but he actually lives I think he lives in France, Paris. But his name is Owen Jones. Owen Jones. And so if you go to his page, he has a really good video that goes over the specifics of everything that was being mentioned about the document. So
Oh, nice.
if you want to save yourself some time, I watched part of the video. I didn't get to finish it yet, but he does a good job. He's a very smart guy.
All right, I'll look that up.
Yeah, please do. Okay, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. Canadian. Love Canadians. Don't like Canada in terms of the government and what's happening up there. It's been a disaster what they've done, man. I don't know if you know this, but in Canada, there are actually laws now about misusing gender-related pronouns. It's absurd. I mean, it's just, anyway, I don't want to misgender anybody, but okay, we have Sea-Tang and Aseya. Sea-Tang. Let's see what was on Sea-Tang's mind. Oh, they're not coming up. Let's see if we can get Aseya up here. Hope I'm saying that right.
Hey, assalamu alaikum to everybody.
Hi. Hello.
Quickly, I just wanted to come on to speak of a narrative that I kind of want everybody to understand. I'm a Palestinian, by the way, from the West Bank.
Hmm.
I've noticed that a lot of people are getting confused between the borders and the checkpoints that are on Palestine. The border that Gaza has is something that basically sits outside, stopping them from going into Egypt, Lebanon, to other countries, etc. Now, there's a checkpoint that sits right out of Gaza that's filled with cameras, very heavy, strong surveillance that sees who goes in and out of Gaza. And what people are not understanding, what us in the West Bank have been screaming, is if the IDF, would leave that checkpoint, like remove it. So just the women and children, we're not asking for men, we're asking for our women and children to come into the West Bank, my side, so we can feed our own people, give them the medications they need, shelter our people without them having to be refugees thrown in tents in Egypt or wait for some kind of visa to be given by Israel to go into Lebanon, Egypt, or wherever it is they want to throw my people. If people can comprehend this, because West Bank is only 2-hour drive away from Gaza. If you go closer to Jerusalem, it's even shorter of a ride for them to get into a place where they can have food and shelter and be bathed, for crying out loud. But what's going on over there now, it's a nightmare. They're being sniped by the IDF soldiers that are on ground in Gaza. They're being humiliated. Children that are on their bikes trying to forget about the trauma that they've been through are also being sniped. It's crazy. And at this point, I want to lose my mind because, again, my side of Palestine sits 2 hours away and I can't get to my people to feed my people. As Palestinians, we're very prideful. We hate asking for money and help. As a Could you hear me? I'm sorry, I had a phone call. Hello? I'm sorry, Chip. I cannot hear
Sorry,
you, so I'm
I
gonna
had
have
my
to
phone. I was
drop.
muted.
Oh, okay.
What I just wanted to say one thing real quick is that since October 7th, no age group in the West Bank, 305 Palestinian civilians have been unalived either by settlers or by the IDF, which is unbelievable. It's more than 3 per day.
That's correct. And like I was saying before I got cut off, I'm sorry, I had a phone call.
It's
We're
okay.
very prideful people as Palestinians. We don't want our people to be refugees in any country when we're more than capable of feeding the Gaza people, clothing and bathing them. Has it gotten worse in West Bank? Of course it has. Because now they're taking their anger out on us. They're retaliating on us. The settlers are treating us awful. It's crazy what's going on in the West Bank. I also want to say one more thing because I know my time here is limited. If you guys have ever heard of an author named Ghassan Khanafani, I believe that's how we pronounce his last name. He wrote a book called Return to Haifa. In 1948, when that first war broke out, their first initial thought was we have to get out of our house to safety. It was a Palestinian couple. Through the hectic of them leaving the home because they were being afraid by the IDF who came and terrorized their village, they forgot their baby boy sleeping in the crib. The IDF boy had kidnapped the baby boy. 20 years later, the baby boy comes back into Palestine as an IDF soldier to unalive his own people. It's a real book. Please look into it. And the only reason why I mention this now because there's a baby girl that went missing in Gaza, was kidnapped by an IDF soldier. The IDF soldier is unalive, and now everybody is looking for this baby girl, and she's nowhere to be found. You're muted again, Chip.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I try to keep quiet so I don't have any background noise. I heard about that story about the baby that was taken by the IDF, and who knows? I mean, I don't know if she's being cared for, or if she's being, who knows what's happening. It's just,
Right. It's
I
like
kind of have
they
I do have mixed feelings. I mean, leaving a baby by itself may be worse than taking it. I don't know exactly what you're supposed to do in that situation, but
Right. So again, it's called The Return to Haifa because the people in the comments are asking for the name of the book. It's based on a true story. Please don't stop speaking about Palestine. I know they're bringing other politics in the news to make us forget. Please don't stop talking about it. My people appreciate people like you, Chip, that are non-Palestinians that are standing for the rights of the Palestinians.
yeah,
And I hope
my
this
pleasure.
war would be over soon, just for our people to be fed. That's all we're asking for our people to be fed.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chip.
you're welcome. Yeah, thanks for the nice words. Yeah, I'm not going to stop. I mean, I think if you know about something like this, that's a complete inequality and an injustice, you have a duty to speak out, right? It's the right thing to do. And the way I look at it is, if I were in the shoes of a Palestinian, how would I feel in terms of what's being done? And just awful, right? It's just so out of control bad. I mean, I don't know if I'd be able to not feel hatred towards people that are doing that to me or my family. I don't know how you can't. And just as an outsider, I'll admit this publicly. I am sickened by what I see. And I'm really sickened by the language that people use who support this, who, if they don't care, and a lot of them don't know a lot of the context, but they just don't seem to care. They look at it from their point of view only. They have no ability to be compassionate or think of the other person first. And, do unto others as you would like them do unto you. Or have them, that's the saying. That's the golden rule, right? They're not living by the golden rule. They're living by the bullshit rule, which is, I don't give a hell what happens to you. I'm doing what's right for me. Go to hell. That's the Israeli rule, or at least the Zionist rule. I don't like that. I don't care who's doing it. Just in this case, it happens to be Zionists who happen to be of Jewish heritage, but it's that attitude and behavior that I just despise it. Okay, C-Tang. Let's see if C-Tang can get in better this time.
Hi, how are
Hello?
you?
Good, thanks.
Hi, can you hear?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thanks for having me on. I've been talking about this issue a lot. There's one issue I haven't heard about much. Like, I think the political ideology of the H group is legitimate. Because what they're asking for is basically in line with international law, the 1967 border.
Yeah.
In terms of the violence, obviously, like, I'm not going to justify it. Some people do, but I won't. But we didn't talk. I haven't heard people talk. People talk about like how can Palestine, vote for H group. Actually, they did try to have an election in 2021, and people are not talking about it. I haven't heard people talk about it. So the Fatah and H group agreement in 2021 offer a different political horizon. This is from a leftist kind of Israeli group. So they were the whole election for the presidency of the Palestinian Authority in 2021. And the H group decided to moderate this decision, and the election were planned to take place in accordance with the Oslo Accord.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the commitment to a peaceful, uphold international law, establish a state with the 1967 border, and allow East Jerusalem as its capital, and recognizing the PLO as a legitimate and exclusive umbrella network, conduct a peaceful populist struggle, and transfer the separate government in the Gaza Strip to the Palestinian Authority. So the President Abbas sent this agreement to the Biden administration and the European government in hope that they would support holding a national election with participation after they have constantly moderate the decision to the point where they're like, okay, I'm going to accept the 1967 border. But then Israel still would not allow East Jerusalem, Palestinian Jerusalem vote because they believe Jerusalem belongs entirely to them. So
Yeah.
I am so sick of people saying October 7th was unprovoked. It was not anything. Israel has done everything they can to push H group into having no political solution at all. Like there's nothing they could do other than like to self-implode or do like I mean, of course, like they could just dissolve and give up, and that's what the Israel want them to do, just to give up the Palestinian state. But the most important thing is you have to respect Jerusalem. It's not, according to international law, it doesn't belong to Israel alone. And if there's no agreement on that, there will be no peace. There's never going to be peace.
Yeah. I agree with you. So, yeah, it's sickening. I think John Kennedy said those who make peaceful resolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. And that's really true.
Yeah.
And that's what we've seen for decades. There's been this quote desire for, like I said, a path to peace, which has been, let me turn this light off, been garbage, right? Absolute garbage.
And they always talk about H group being violent, but they have tried peaceful solution, but none of them, it's all been ignored. So I just
Yeah,
want to say that.
exactly. Yeah, it's discouraging on so many levels, and I think the big problem here in the United States is that we can't break through to the elected officials to make a difference, and that's the most big. That's people want this to end. I think something like 65 or 70% of the population wants a ceasefire, and yet we can't get through to our elected officials. They're so compromised by the political system that they don't either want to act or aren't willing to act. That's
Yeah.
a huge
Yeah.
problem.
I just wish people understand that H group's demand is legitimate, instead of just saying, oh, they're just immediately like, oh, just a T group, that's wrong, that's evil. Like, there should be more nuance to that. And like, if we can't look at the political ideology separately, then we cannot really stay very interested in peace.
Yeah, no, I agree with you
Thank you
100%.
for letting me on.
You're welcome. Yeah,
Right.
thanks for being on. I appreciate you. Have a good weekend.
Good.
Yeah, some days you wake up and you're just like, damn, I can't believe this is still going on. And I mean, I can't even imagine what it must be like for the people there. We do get some reports from a few different people, Mansour, and there's one other young lady, I forget her name. It'll come to me. But you watch the reports every day, and it's like, this is day 90, this is day 89. It just never ends. And they talk about, where are we supposed to go? We don't know when the next thing's going to happen, and we have no advance notice. And just as the Israelis will tell you, we tell people exactly what we're going to do ahead of time. We're the only army that does this. Bullshit. You do it sometimes, but how can people leave a hospital if they're sick? They're in a bed. What are they supposed to do? Like get up some miracle, get out of bed and start running down the street? And then you attack the hospital or whatever the thing may be. There's videos showing the Israeli troops smiling and cheering before they blow up some massive like mosque or school or whatever. They just take great pleasure in destroying the infrastructure in Gaza. Seemingly, that's what their videos show. They're laughing and cheering and having a good old time. That's why I put out that video today. If you haven't seen the video that I put out today, please watch it. Because it says, the team in white and blue doesn't like it so much when they F around and find out. And like anybody can put some explosives in something or drop a bomb from the sky and absolutely obliterate somebody. That's cowardly. But when you go to fight a well-armed, motivated foe who uses the tactics and the knowledge of the terrain to their advantage, they kick your ass. That's what's been happening in terms of the actual ground fighting. And so few of the H group have been unalived versus what's happened to the blue and white. So that's why I don't think they're going to go anywhere. Plus, the H group is more of a concept than it is a group. So it gets back to the same thing. When you oppress somebody, you should expect there's going to be resistance. There's always going to be resistance. It will never end until you either remove all the people, which you can't do because of international relations. You would be there would be consequences for that. And hopefully there will be. Hi, Juliet. Thanks for supporting me. I appreciate that. But it seems like they're going to keep doing what they're going to do until somebody stops them, either from the outside. And I think what would happen if it does, I hope it doesn't, not that they don't deserve it, but a lot of people from Israel have left. I don't know if you know this, but the airports have been full. People from Israel who hold dual citizenship are going back to wherever they have their other passport because they kind of get a feeling that it's like the people when they started leaving Ukraine. They kind of knew it was coming. And this thing may escalate. I think that's the goal of the Israelis and the Americans, is to draw the Iranians in, because there's some warmongers in the United States that have wanted to attack and take over Iran for decades, since the 1979 revolution. So, and they're a bunch of warmongers, and we have a bunch of those people, these people that are like the neoconservatives that think that the American projection of power is the most important thing. We're a waning empire with $34 trillion of debt and 900 military bases that spends nearly $1 trillion a year on maintaining that whole system, and even more when they allocate for these different acts of militarism, something like $165 billion for Ukraine. Insane. Yeah, Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina, is a great example. He's the guy that talks smack, never once fought a thing in his life, total chicken hawk piece of you-know-what, couldn't even win a fist fight to save his life, and he's talking about having, tens of thousands of Americans lose their life to fight a war that doesn't need to be fought. We need to get along with other people and have mutual beneficial trade and keep it at that. Not try to take over places and bully people into submission and support countries that are basically mass unaliving people for their own objectives, that don't have no direct benefit to the United States. So somewhere, some way, there's some power structures that are influencing the decisions that get made, because it's not in our interest to spend this money and to support what's happening. Most Americans are like, no way. And even people that support Israel, who have a conscience, don't want to see the collateral damage that's happening. They just find a different way to justify it. Oh, it's human shields, which we all know is bullshit, right? So I've heard that argument for decades. Oh, all they do is operate at hospitals. All they do is go to schools. No, they don't. No, they don't. That's bullshit arguments. That's to justify the slaughter of innocent people. And the Israelis feel like they have the right to do it, to kind of show them who's boss, as I like to say. And that's what they do. Let me see if we have any more guests coming up. We had one more guest, but they dropped. So I don't know about you. Where I live right now, it's cold and rainy. I talked about this before. If there's anybody that dropped on here, there's always somebody who doesn't know me. So I'll just quickly reiterate. If you're wondering who the hell I am, like who's this guy? My name is Chip Barnes. I'm an Army officer, former Army officer, veteran, and used to serve in a tank unit on the front lines of the first Persian Gulf War in 1990. And I learned in college about the Israel-Palestine issue just by chance. One of my college classmates did a presentation on the first Intifada, which was in 1987, a big uprising. So I learned a bunch of stuff that I didn't know, like most of us who have subsequently learned about this. And it's kind of been a focus of mine for most of my adult life. I've tried to learn as much as I can. I don't know everything. There's scholars that know way more than I do, like the guy Liam O'Mara, who I had on about a week ago. But I know enough to kind of understand the basics of it. And I always learn more from other people. I didn't know about that, what the person just talked about, that political objective that was sent to the America. I didn't know about that. So again, it's always nice to hear from somebody who knows more. Okay, we do have a guest in the queue now. Viv's here. Okay, Viv, come on up, Viv. Viv's a regular. Always nice to hear from Viv.
Hi, Trip. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Trip, just want to say, as always, thank you for the insight and, giving up your time here.
Yeah.
Just one thing that I've noticed online, there are a few petitions. They saying it's for the South African court case, and it's actually Israeli intelligence that's just collecting pro-Palestinian names to track them. So just want to put it out there. They don't need any petition for the court case on Thursday. Literally, it's just petitions just to literally track pro-Palestinian. So just wanted
Yeah.
to say that out here as well, because I have one of the legal counsels. They've seen it online. They shared it with me, so they just wanted to say just be careful about that as well.
Thank you.
Also, it's really with the court case coming up on Thursday. There's a few points on the Israeli side. They saying that South Africa helped, I think it was al-Bashiri in Sudan. Remember when they had the conflict? So
Yeah.
they're going to be rebutting against that in that way. And they're making the accusation as well that South Africa has a personal interest as well, and that we're supplying arms to the age group, which is totally, BS.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the story. I just wanted to bring that up for
Thank
anyone
you.
to know online as well. And also with the Mossad 33 that were arrested, Chip, it wasn't only in Turkey. Now, I'm not sure why they're not
Ar-
saying it in media.
Ireland, right?
Yeah, there was a few in Ireland, a few in the UK, and in the US, they actually counteracted one of them. They wouldn't actually let it go through. So they've managed to arrest worldwide, as far as Spain as well. But yeah, so Turkey's not playing, so they're definitely gonna go hard on it. So that's another thing. With Lebanon, Iran, I don't think that they're going to do anything. They're not gonna fall into their hands because they want them to slip up, so it can be a big, massive,
Yeah.
chaos, so that they can do more of the land grab and do more of what they want to do. So Iran and
Yeah.
Turkey is quite aware of that. So just want to say thank you so much for having me on a trip, and I hope you have a great evening. Take care.
Thanks, Viv. Appreciate you. Yeah, there's a lot of curiosity as to why no one's intervened yet. But remember, every country has to look at their interests first. And even though it's the moral thing to do, unfortunately, that can't, in a lot of cases, is not the first or second or even the fifth consideration. So there's one more person in the guest queue. I just want to say one thing before I bring them up. We're getting close to concluding, but first of all, I appreciate everybody being here today. Happy Saturday. Hope you're having a good weekend. Thanks for sharing some of it with me. And I am going to be putting out a few more videos today if you want to keep an eye out, because I've got some catch-up stuff. I've been saving a bunch of videos from other content creators, and I want to include some of their content because it's really good. I think you may not have seen it, and I want to make sure other people see it. And want to reiterate, there's a protest coming up in Washington, D.C. next Saturday, which is January the 13th. It's called the March for Gaza. And I'll do a video about it. Other people have done it, but I'll do one. And it's going to be big. So if you do go, just make aware your cell phone's probably not going to work. And if you're going to bring it, just to forewarn you, what cell phones do is they try to ping off a tower. That's how they start. They try to find the nearest tower. When they do ping off it, they start to send the traffic. The government has a product called a Stingray. They used it a lot of times to track drug dealers or dissidents. They're going to have trucks with stingrays at these protests. And what happens is, if you don't know much about how cellular traffic works, every phone has a unique identifier. It's called an IMEI number. It's built into the circuitry of the phone. And when the data packets go out through the network, whether you're checking your email or using the cell phone, those packets go through the network, and part of the packet is your IMEI number. It's in the data as it sends it out. And so it's like a sniffer. It intercepts the packets, deconstructs them, and figures out who owns those phones, because there's a record of that, and they keep that record at the NSA. I don't know if you know this or not, but when you buy a phone and you sign up with a network, that goes straight to the NSA. So, at least allegedly. I just probably have to say that for this thing not to get shut down. Anyway, what is reported is that the government they create a database of the attendees. So if you don't want to be marked down as somebody who attended, which who knows what that could be used for, don't use your phone. Keep it on airplane mode while you're near the protest, for what it's worth. If you're going to go, make sure you bring your own water. Make sure you bring some milk in case you get pepper sprayed, which really sucks, by the way. If you've ever been hit by pepper spray, it's no fun. It takes about 20-30 minutes to wear off. It's really bad. Bring your own food. Bring walkie-talkies. Since you're not going to be able to use your cell phone, you can, if you get lost or someone else trying to meet with, just have walkie-talkies. And you can meet at like a landmark not too far off, like a restaurant, or we used to meet at Starbucks, but no more of that. That's the other. So I just want to quickly reiterate. So I have a link tree in my bio, and it has a lot of cool stuff. So it's got all my other social media, my Twitter, which I hope you'll follow me. It's just my name. And in the very first tweet message, called a pinned tweet, I have a group of great people who I've followed over the years that I think you'll really like. So I always like to promote other people who are doing good work, and there's some amazing people who make me look like a rank rookie on there. Trust me, they're good. And then in my link tree, there's some groups that I've created on Telegram. One is called Palestine in Focus. You'll see the rest. One of them is called Action for Change. And Action for Change is the way you can get involved to overcome some of these political hurdles we're talking about. Well, if elections aren't working, what do we do, right? That's the question. That's where you'll start to see some of the conversations and some of those answers. And it's not complicated in terms of what needs to be done. It's just hard to do. It's like lose weight, right? Easy to say, hard to do. Same thing with what has to happen. It's not a rocket science what has to get done, but it's just very difficult to do it, right? But if we want to overcome the problems that we're talking about, we're going to have to do something like that. If somebody has a better solution, let's hear about it. And a lot of people have been thinking about this for a long time. Anyway, so if you want to help out, I don't have any income coming in. I'm trying to learn how to trade. I've been doing it for a long time, but I'm like a break-even trader right now. So maybe I'll get better and make some money at that. But right now, I'm basically no income. So if you want to help out the cause, I have some ways you can do that. The best way you can help me is on my Patreon, because it's a small recurring donation of $5 a month for as long as you want to do it. I'm going to be adding tiers to my Patreon, which have additional content, private access. I'm going to start doing some of my lives only for my members, just because I got to make some money at some point. So that's coming. I've been doing this free for about 2.5 months on here, doing six days a week, two hours or more, which is fun. I enjoy it. But at some point, and those of you who are my regulars, you know my schedule. You've been coming. Thank you for being here. And hopefully, if you're able to, if you're somebody who's on the edge, you have there was the working mother today that said she's got to work, because if you're on the edge, I don't want your money, right? That I want you to take care of yourself. But if you're somebody who's doing well and you can afford to give $5 a month, please do. But if you want to do a one-time thing, I have things like Cash App, I have Venmo, I have PayPal, Zelle, which is bank to bank, and then of course the Patreon that I mentioned there. So anything is appreciated, because I got to figure out how to make this work. So, but anyway, just the words that you give me in terms of encouragement mean a lot to me, because as I've told you before, I was very hesitant to do this. I had a lot of fear, fear of failure. But thankfully, people have been very receptive and very kind. Most people. I've had some people who've sent me death threats and other threats, which hopefully don't come to fruition. But anyway, so there's one more person in the guest queue. We're going to finish up after that person. It's 2:00 now. So Bashi wants to come on. Let's see what Bashi has to say, and then we'll close up. Oh, one more thing before Bashi comes on. I forgot to say. I always forget this. I record these lives. They're recorded by TikTok. I download them, and I put them up right now. So in my link tree, like I said, I have a YouTube channel and I have a Rumble channel. They're not very spiffy because I have to work with somebody to get it. But for the meantime, I'm at least putting the content there. So if you missed the beginning of this, or you want to go back and look at other lives, there's some really good guests we've had and some really great conversations about so many issues. They're all stored there. It says TikTok Live, the day and the date. So check them out. I will have last night's up there in a few minutes, and I'll have this one up there as soon as I can download it and put it up there. So that's that. And by the way, I don't know if anybody's moderating today, if M's here, but usually I have some moderators that are helping out. Just to let you know, I don't know if you can hear me. Bashi, we can't hear you. So here's my suggestion. I'll keep the live going. If you exit the live, exit TikTok, come back into TikTok, re-enter the live, it should be okay. If you can still hear me. So we'll wait a minute or two, see if that happens. Because I've had that happen to me. The other thing that happens sometimes when I go on Eric's live, Eric Warsaw, so they'll bring me up, right? I'm up in the box, but then I can't hear what they're saying. So then I have to do what I just said. I have to leave TikTok, exit the live, leave TikTok, come back in, and then it works. So who knows? And yeah, today is one of these days where I am, it's like dark, rainy, cloudy, nasty, cold. So this is a good indoor day to get caught up on stuff. So I'm not going anywhere. I'm hunkering down, and I got a lot of to-do list stuff. I'm gonna get my Patreon set up, thank God. Try to get my website up, which is really hard. I'm not good at that shit. And I'm doing some studying of how to edit videos properly. So much editing is so much to learn about editing, man. And I might even have a phone call. Somebody volunteered who's on TikTok to help me out with like just my general social media. I got to get thumbnails. If there's anybody here who's artistic or graphically oriented, knows how to use Canva, for example, please reach out to me. My email's at the bottom of my link tree. It just says Linktree, Chip Barnes in my bio. Very bottom it says email me. So if you want to contact me. If you have a guest you'd like me to have, or if you have a topic you'd like me to cover, you can feel free to email me that if you want to. Or you can catch me on Telegram in the different groups that we set up if you want to do that. Now, last thing. I'm not your mother. I'm not your father, right? I can't tell you what to do, but I can ask you nicely. So in that role, I want to ask you nicely. First of all, when you come onto people's lives, if you tap on their forehead, it increases the number of likes, the little hearts that pop up, and that gathers more people to it. Okay. By the way, money-wise, just to let you know, on these live sessions, you probably think, well, Chip's doing all this work. I get paid like 3 cents. I kid you not, or 7 cents. I've had these. I got 0 last night. Said, congratulations, you've earned 0. I was like, why did they even send this shit to me? So, anyway, I think because of the type of content that I do, there's something called the community program or something like that. But whenever you're doing controversial content, you get nothing. So I think Quinn said this. He was making about $1,700 a month doing TikTok videos when they were basically like travel videos. But as soon as he started talking about Palestine, it dropped down to like 100 or something like that. I don't even make that. I probably get $20 a month or something like that. So not that you need to know all this stuff. I'm just telling you the truth. So, and one day I'm going to take all the copies of all these little 7 cents, put together a video and just show 7 cents, 2 cents, 1 cent, 0. It's just kind of funny how they do it. And the other thing to tell you is there's a little gold star at the top of the screen or something like that. What that is a way you can contribute to somebody directly through TikTok. Here's why I think, listen, if you want to do that, great. But as somebody just said, Vicky said, TikTok keeps 70% of anything you earn through TikTok, which I think is a pretty large number, right? They can run their business however they want, it's their company. But 70 is a large, I would never do more than 50-50 if it was me, but I'd probably do 75-25 to the content creator, but that's just me. Anyway, see if that person came back in the queue. Nope, they didn't come back up. I don't see them in the list here. So anyway, it's been a fun Saturday talking with everybody. Like I said, let me tell you my schedule one more time. My name is Chip Barnes. If you're just hopping on, I talk about geopolitics a lot. So it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. And then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday from 12 noon to about 2 p.m. Sometimes we have more guests. I go a little longer. And that's all Eastern Standard Time. So like I said, if you have anything you want me to talk about, send me an email or whatever. Somebody just sent me a PayPal donation. Thank you so much. Sohair, I think it is. Sohair, thank you. Or Sohair, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, I used to do some Ubering just to close on this. And I met somebody who was an older woman who used to work in fundraising for one of the local universities. Very well-known person in the community, very well-to-do. And we met. I took her on a reservation ride to someplace. And she's like, I really like you. I like to, can you work for me? So I ended up working for her directly. And for about a year, I took her, it was like driving Miss Daisy. I took her everywhere. and she paid me very well, which was very kind of her. But I just found out she died because I hadn't heard from her for like 2 months. I'm like, her name was Sylvia, very nice woman. And I used to take her out to dinner like 3 nights a week. Like, she was just such a nice person. But unfortunately, she got cancer, and then she died pretty quickly, which is sad. I mean, we weren't like friends, like, but I mean, we were, she was just, when you know somebody like that, you kind of spend a lot of time in their life, you get to know them really well, stuff like that. So I feel bad. I met her daughter one time. I feel bad for her daughter because I've lost one parent, and losing parents sucks, right? Anyway, that's kind of it for today. If anybody has any other issues, I did ask earlier about the format, so I'm going to give it a try. Maybe we'll try it on Thursdays. We'll do like a panel just to give it a go and see if it works. I'm trying like crazy to get guests for like a podcast because people keep saying, why don't you do a podcast? So I'm trying to start one of those. I'll probably give it some silly name like everybody else does. But get some, you know who I want to get on? I mean, that's going to sound crazy. I don't know if you all agree with this or not, but I like to get on people that are controversial. Like a guy like Nick Fuentes or Sneeko or Jackson Hinkle or whatever. Some people think that you're like stepping down to their level and agreeing with it. That's bullshit. I think challenging bad speech is good with good speech, right? But I'm not against anybody talking. I'm not against Fiona Ryan. In fact, I heard Fiona, by the way, this kind of sickened me. I don't know if you know who Fiona Ryan is. She's another content creator. There was a little bit of a kerfuffle when she and I connected. But be that as it may, whatever she does, she does. But she was on, Mansour, the great guy from Gaza. So she got on with him somehow on one of his lives, and all she did was talk about herself for like 5 minutes. Here you have a guy from Gaza who's trying to keep people updated, and she's talking about herself. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Ask questions about how he's doing. Get information out to the public on what's happening with them. So, anyway, everybody's different. Everybody's entitled to their style. I try to do it as politely and as down the middle as I can, but you can't please everybody, right? So that's kind of it for today. I hope everybody has a great rest of your weekend, and thank you for spending some of it with me. And I will see you the next time. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.